Hey guys, how are you all doing? Welcome to my channel. So, today we are gonna see, what if Naruto got a overprotective and possessive vampire girlfriend, part 2. So before we start, go check out the author of this fanfic, Seeker Pendragon. Link is in the description. Also subscribe if you enjoy the video. Let's start the story. The smoke finally cleared, and when both Jiraiya and Naruto went to greet Jiraiya, they found him performing his introduction dance. I am the man whom other men in the elemental nations envy, and the man whom the woman lusts for. I am the great sage of Mount Myaboku, the teacher of the Yondaime Hokage, and one of the most powerful men to ever live. I am the great Jiraiya-sama, Jiraiya exclaimed before he proudly puffed out his chest. Both and Naruto stared blankly at the perverted sage. Even Kyuubi and Altair had nothing to say about that. And Altair was a freaking sword. Pa-ma! And the few toads that were with simply stared blankly at the white-haired toad sage. It appeared that they would have to discipline Jiraiya about his so-called introduction again. Shiroi's eye twitched slightly. That dance and introduction is so redundant, she uttered, with the toads and Naruto nodding in agreement. Naruto remembered the first time he saw the perverted sage introduction. After he saw it he wasn't impressed, and he thought the old pervert wasn't a ninja, and that he beat Ebisu as a total fluke. Honestly, it made him seem so stupid and incompetent. Naruto blinked. Since when did he know that word? He shrugged lightly. Oh well, it made him seem smarter anyway. Inside his cage, Kyuubi snorted. Yeah, right. You have a way to go before you can be considered smart, Kyuubi muttered. It's not that he didn't consider his container smart, it's just who was he kidding? He thought his container was a dumb ass. Kyuubi gave one last snicker at his container's expense, before he laid his head down and went back to sleep. Hey, it was hard work being a giant demonic entity inside the blonde. Oh, who the freak was he kidding? He was just lazy as hell. So ladies, now that you know exactly who I am, what do you say we just got down in bed? And Jiraiya abruptly came to a halt when he opened his eyes, and noted he was in the presence of Naruto and the others. He blinked once, twice, and a third time. This isn't the brothel I was in. The explanation? Everyone merely gave him deadpan expressions. Anyways, Jiraiya-chan, Naruto-chan here did something truly amazing. Fukasaku began wanting to change the subject. Jiraiya raised an eyebrow. Oh really? And what was that? Whatever Jiraiya was expecting to hear, Naruto mastered Senjutsu in just a month, wasn't it? It nearly gave him a heart attack when Naruto entered Sage mode. As proof, it had taken him years to get the basics of Senjutsu down before he could even use it properly. And even then, he never truly mastered Sage mode, seeing as he would gain toadish features whenever he entered Sage mode. The mere thought that Naruto mastered Sage mode in just 1 month, and that he mastered it to the point where only his eyes would change, filled him with great pride. You've done a great job, Naruto. I'm proud of you, Jiraiya said, getting over his shock. Thanks, Ero-sensei, said the blonde with an embarrassed grin. So where are we off to now, Ero-jiji? Shiroi asked. Just as Jiraiya was going to speak, Fukasaku immediately spoke, interrupting Jiraiya before he could get a word in. Actually, Shiroi-chan, I believe Jiraiya-chan has something more to say to Naruto-chan, the elder toad said, as he gave Jiraiya an expectant look. Jiraiya stiffened for a moment, before he sighed in acceptance. Naruto, again, I haven't been honest with you, the perverted hermit began with a somber expression. Naruto tilted his head in confusion, before he removed his hood from atop his head. Shiroi merely narrowed her eyes slightly. What is it this time, Ero-jiji? She thought. What do you mean, Ero-sensei? Naruto asked in confusion. Would you say that? After I tell you about your father, Naruto? Jiraiya solemnly thought. What I mean, Naruto, is that I knew your father, Jiraiya began. Both Naruto and Shiroi stiffened. Naruto because Jiraiya knew of his father, but how was that possible? Someone as famous as Jiraiya couldn't know his father, right? And Shiroi stiffened because of a suspicion she had. When she was watching Naruto's memory, she idly noted the resemblance he and the Yondaime had, but she wrote it off as a coincidence. However, now she wasn't so sure. She knew that if Naruto was in fact the Yondaime's son, then I would almost stop at nothing to kill him, since they would fear the return of another yellow flash. She inwardly scoffed, like she would let them come within a mile of him. Who was my father, Ero-sensei? Naruto quietly questions, unknowingly breaking Shiroi from her thoughts. Your father was one of the most powerful shinobi in the world, and he was kinder than any other person in the world, as well. I don't even think it was possible for him to truly hate someone, Jiraiya began, as his eyes glazed over in remembrance. Your father invented 2 of the most known jutsu in the world. Your father was feared by many, and loved by many, but no one loved your father more than your mother. As you know, you're a member of the Uzumaki clan, and your mother was the second Jinchuriki for the Kyuubi, with Uzumaki Mito being the first, and you the third, Jiraiya said. Naruto nodded. He knew full well of his predecessors for the Kyuubi. After all, he was bound to figure it out sooner or later. I mean, he did have a giant nine-tailed demon fox in him that had way too much time on his hands, not to mention what he learned from the Uzumaki clan scrolls. Your father was also my student before Naruto. His name was Namikaze Minato, and he was the Yondaime Hokage. Jiraiya started with a blank expression, though if you looked hard enough you would find a little fear and hope in his eyes. All was silent, as Naruto held him down, his bangs overshadowing his eyes. Everyone waited for Naruto's reaction with bated breaths. The only thing that could be heard was the chirping of birds, and even that was falling silent. The wind blew slightly, brushing against Naruto's robes. Slowly Naruto spoke. "Why me?" he simply asked. Shiroi was quick to hold his hand, as a sign of comfort and assurance. She felt Naruto's hand immediately tighten around hers, and she smiled softly. Minato couldn't just trust anyone with the Kyuubi Naruto. "I don't know much of what happened that night, but from what I understand, sealing the Kyuubi into you was the only option. Could another parent give up their child if you yourself are not willing to do the same?" Jiraiya explained. Silence was the only thing that greeted his answer. He solemnly began to put his head down, before he noticed Naruto's head begin to lift. When Naruto lifted his head, everyone was able to see the tears that he was holding back his eyes, and to the shock of everyone he smiled. "I understand why he did, Ero-sensei. And I know that I can't just keep brooding over this. My father sacrificed himself not only for the village, but for me, as well. I know that he loved me. I can feel it for some strange reason, so I'll make sure to make my parents proud of what I'll become. Or my name isn't Uzumaki Namikaze Naruto," the blonde exclaimed, with tears of both sadness and happiness flowing freely down his cheeks. Everyone looked at the blonde in amazement. He wasn't angry, he didn't hate his father, he understood his father's decision. However, looking into the blonde's smiling face, everyone knew that everything would be alright. Shiroi tightened her grip on Naruto's hand, and she gave him a warm smile. This entire thing only made her love the blonde even more than she already did. She happily laid her head on his shoulder, smiling in contentment, as he laid his head upon hers. Jiraiya gave a happy smile, as he started his godson, and most amazing student. Truly the blonde was one of the most amazing human beings on the planet. The elder toads, and their younger counterparts all smiled in contentment. The awkward and tense air had all but disappeared, leaving them filled with love, happiness, and joy. Altair pulsed in happiness at his wielder's side, happy that his wielder was happy. Inside his cage, Kyuubi, who had been abruptly awoken from his nap because of the tense atmosphere he had sensed, merely stared through his container's eyes for several moments. "Rikudojiji, it looks like you may have been correct. This child could be the one of the prophecy. But no, it's still too soon to tell if he truly is the one you spoke of," Kyuubi muttered before he put his head back down and slept once more. Jiraiya let everyone enjoy the joyous air for several minutes, before he coughed into his fist. Both Naruto and Shiroi immediately set their attention on him, though they did not separate from their embrace. The toads and the elders merely looked on in curiosity. "Sorry to cut this short, but there's one thing I want to give you, Naruto, before you begin your first mission since we started this journey," Jiraiya began. Seeing that he had everyone's attention, he continued. "Now here's the first thing I want to give you," Jiraiya said, as he opened his scroll and channeled a small amount of chakra into it. A small puff of smoke later, some papers that appeared to be notes came into view. Jiraiya quickly scooped them up and handed them to the blonde Uzumaki. "This, Naruto, is the notes your father made on his most devastating jutsu, the Hiraishin," he explained. Everyone gazed upon the notes in awe. These papers contained the mechanics on how to use the Hiraishin? It was your father's wish that you learn this when you were ready. He made it so that only blood relatives could use this. Basically, the only person who could use the Hiraishin is Naruto, the white-haired Sannin seriously stated. Naruto's eyes widened. He was the only one able to use the Hiraishin, a jutsu sought after by countless individuals for either power or prestige, and he was the only one capable of effectively using it. This technique was the cause of the end of the Third Great War. These techniques made Might Guy's speed look as if it were a slow-moving slug. This technique was created by his father. It made him grin in anticipation at what he would be able to do with a technique such as this. The possibilities were nearly endless. He smiled softly as he looked at his father's handwriting. It was so neat and well written, almost as if he wanted these notes to be made perfectly so that he wouldn't have to misinterpret the instructions on it. He gently folded the notes and placed them inside his pouch, patting just for an extra measure. He felt Shiroi shift her head, and he turned to see what she was doing, only for their eyes to meet. They stayed that way for several moments, before Shiroi gave him a quick peck on his lips, and slowly backed away with a slight smirk on her face. Naruto had a small blush on his face, as everyone cooed out in awe. Honestly, it still amazed him how she could be so forward in public, but that was one of the main things he loved about her. She was just so beautiful and wonderful. Her unique pink slitted eyes enticed him in a never-ending void that he could get lost in forever. Her long silvery white hair was smooth, and felt as if it were made of silk. Her cute small nose made her expression seem adorable. Her teasing, and almost seductive smirk she threw his way were enough for his chest to warm up at a remarkable rate. Though she may be petite, it just seemed to bring out her beauty. She was hardly afraid of anything, and she had no problem with staking her claim on him whenever they were just passing by a town. He knew she had a far darker, and slightly more evil side, but he didn't care about that. He loved more than anything. His crush on Sakura was just that, a childish crush. He knew that his crush on Sakura was pointless. After all, the way she reacted when Sasuke was pulled out of his coma when Itachi used Tsukuyomi was proof that pursuing a relationship with her would be pointless. So he gave up on pursuing a relationship with her after that. He only promised to bring Sasuke back cause he wanted her to be happy. It was strange here he thought that he would never truly know love, seeing as Konoha denied him that, and his crush constantly rejected him, only for him to meet the girl who changed him for the better. A girl he loved more than anything. He would do anything for her. As long as she was happy, he was happy. He had already decided several months ago that his heart and soul belonged to her now. She was his light in this world now. He still wanted to protect the people close to him, don't get him wrong, but the people close to him could only fill the void in his heart for so long. He knew that more than likely, when the knowledge of Kyuubi came out, his friends would either ignore him or abandon him. He knew it would more than likely happen. After all, even though he defended the village from the Ichibi, there were still some villagers that despised him. Most just began to become neutral towards him, with a rare few actually being friendlier towards him. He knew it would take a while for the entire village to accept him, as a whole, but he was patient. After all, any normal child would have broken under the treatment he received. But patience, and the willingness to try, and give others a second chance were strongly embedded in his being. After all, how can the world know true peace if humans weren't willing to give others a second chance? The question wasn't if peace was possible, the real question was, were people willing to try? Alright Gaki, one last thing to give you before I give you the first mission you had in months, Jiraiya said, breaking Naruto from his thoughts. Naruto rose an eyebrow, and gave the perverted hermit a questioning look. It's time I give you your inheritance money, the perverted sage explained. Naruto and Shiroi blinked before they separated, though they still held hands, and they stared curiously at the white-haired pervert. What inheritance money? The blonde asked. Let's see, the last time I checked your account for ya, the sum of money your parents left was about 10.1 billion ryo, and it steadily increased over the years to about 15.3 billion. Jiraiya shrugged in an uncaring manner. After all, he had nearly 15 years to get over the shock of the amount Naruto had. Now it was time to see everyone else's reaction. The reactions were, as he expected. The toads all held blank expressions before they gradually turned into shock and disbelief, their jaws hanging loosely, and so wide open that flies would have no trouble building a home in them. Naruto had frozen over in shock, his eyes widened to the size of dinner plates. Slowly he brought his hand forward, and he slapped his face, leaving a mark imprint on his face. 15.3 billion? He muttered. Altair just pulsed in confusion on why his wielder was so shocked. Kyuubi, however, currently had his jaw hanging from his mouth, as his eyes were also widened to the size of dinner plates. He only had one thought to sum this all up. They are freaking rich, the fox uttered, as he slowly regained his composure. Shiroi merely had a blank expression on her face, before she slowly began blinking. She only had one thought at the moment. Shopping spree, she excitedly thought. Meanwhile, Jiraiya, Naruto, and Kyuubi all felt a cold shiver run through their spines, before they were dismissed as nothing. However, Jiraiya got an image of Minato giving him a terrified look and, "No, you old fool, take my son, and run away before it's too late." The fantasy Minato frantically roared before he faded away. Jiraiya blinked owlishly before he idly wondered if he was going senile. "I'm rich," Naruto uttered before a wide smile spread across his face. "I'm freaking rich," the blonde yelled, as he pumped his fist in the air. Everyone watched with a smile on their face as they witnessed Naruto's reaction. Jiraiya gave a boorish grin as he stared at his apprentice. Come to think of it, hasn't it already been a year and a half since he took the young blonde on this journey? That meant Jiraiya grinned wider. Tomorrow was the 10th of October. That meant Naruto's birthday was tomorrow. Meh. He figured this was a good birthday gift for him. After all, it's not every day you find out about your family account that has over 15.3 billion ryo in it. Alright, enough celebrating. It's time I give you your first mission since your journey. Jiraiya began, a light grin crossing his features, as Naruto suddenly stopped and stared at him in anticipation, along with Shiroi, who was giving Jiraiya a curious stare, and the toads who leaned forward wanting to know what their summoner's mission is. It's simple. Low-level B rank. Jiraiya began with the possibility of it being a high-level A rank. He quickly finished, seeing the disappointed expression on his student's face. Naruto perked up at that, while Shiroi hummed and thought at what the mission could possibly entail. The toads merely sighed in slight disappointment, as their summoner would only need them if he was fighting an S-rank shinobi. With nothing else to do, they quietly left, leaving only Fukasaku and Shima with the trio of travelers. What does the mission entail, Erojiji? Shiroi asked, giving the Sannin a stare that said he wasn't taking no for an answer. Just a small bandit camp that's been causing some trouble for a settlement near Tanzaku. However, the reason why it could possibly be considered a high-level A rank is because it's been said a shinobi has been seen among them, the white-haired pervert seriously stated. Shiroi's eyes slightly widened, before she glanced at her blonde boyfriend. She knew he could come back from the mission without a scratch, but that didn't stop her from worrying for his safety. Naruto-chan, even if this is merely a low-level B rank, please remember to be wary of anything that could and would happen, Fukasaku sagely said. I understand, Pa. Naruto answered with a grin. Goodbye, Ma. I'll be sure to bring you back some food recipes next time, the blonde said to the female toad. It truly was an interesting and fascinating experience staying with you, Ma, and Pa. Shiroi said with a beaming smile towards the little toads. Fukasaku and Shima smiled at both Naruto and Shiroi, before they both looked blankly towards Jiraiya. Jiraiya-chan, if I hear you corrupted these two wonderful children, I will hunt you down and cut off the thing that makes you a man. Understood, Shima said in a blank tone. Jiraiya, pale as a ghost, fearfully nodded. Good luck on your mission, Naruto-chan, and Jiraiya takes good care of these young ones, the male toad stated. Jiraiya merely gave the two toads a grin, before the trio disappeared in a puff of smoke. It had been a day since they returned from Mount Maiboku, and since then Jiraiya had thought it best that Naruto do this entire mission on his own. At first there were protests mostly from Shiroi's side, but he managed to convince them, though Shiroi needed most of the convincing, and now both Jiraiya and Shiroi were watching, as Naruto entered the settlement where the bandits had been said to have been harassing. So now we will finally see if Naruto's training has paid off, Jiraiya stated. Shiroi merely gave Jiraiya a glance, before she huffed at him, still angry about not being able to assist Naruto in his mission. You know you could prepare yourself for tonight, and I'll tell you how Naruto dies tomorrow, the perverted sage said, a slight leer in his voice. Shiroi raised an eyebrow. What do you mean? Jiraiya grinned. Tonight is Naruto's 14th birthday, he trailed off, a knowing expression on his face. Slowly Shiroi turned her head towards the white-haired perverted sage. What exactly is the date? She asked with an undertone of excitement in her voice. October 10th, he merely answered. Shiroi gave a feral and predatory grin before she stalked towards the hotel the trio were currently taking residence in. Don't interrupt me and Naruto-kun tonight, okay Erojiji, otherwise I'll kill you, the silvery white-haired vampire sweetly said. Oh, don't worry, there's some hot springs in this town that I wanted to check out anyway. He leered, though he never said anything about not adding Shiroi and Naruto's relationship as an inspiration for his next book. He inwardly gave a perverted laugh. Oh, he could just imagine how his fans would react. As Naruto sat down in a stool near the bar, he had a sudden urge to beat Jiraiya into a bloody pulp, but ignored in favor of obtaining information. It had been exactly several hours since he entered the town, and the first thing he did was find a local tavern and enter the sake selling bar. Jiraiya had often told of how taverns could, and always will have information worth obtaining. During his walk through town, he noted how everyone seemed a bit tense and looked upon him with wary eyes. It didn't bother him per se, he just didn't like to be looked at in the middle of the street, so he quietly slipped into the crow and blended in. He was pleased to note how everyone immediately lost sight of him and continued on with their business. After several hours of wandering, he found a tavern and quickly entered it. Once he had entered it, he immediately noticed two suspicious people speaking in the background, and two townsmen conversing hurriedly in front of the bar stand. He decided he would listen in on the townsmen conversation first, seeing as they were closer. Then after he heard enough, he would listen in on the two suspicious others' conversation. So he quietly sat down on a stool close to the two townsmen, but not too close, and pretended to browse through the various drinks they had at the bar. His ear perked up, however, as he listened in on their conversation. I can't believe those damn bandits are harassing the hard-working people of this town, said the first male, the one on the left. I know what you mean, man. It's bad enough that the crops aren't growing so well this year. Now we have freaking bandits stealing what little money we have. Fan-freaking-tastic, the other said, a slight slur in his voice, evidence of the effect of alcohol on him. Tay, why do these stupid bandits have to ruin others' lives? Huh, it's so simple to just get a job and live an honest life. But no, those bandits just have to go the easy way, don't they? It's pathetic if you asked me, said the first one, taking a swig of his sake. Yeah. As a matter of fact, I heard those two people in the back are a part of that little bandit group. That got Naruto's attention. Oh really? Well, maybe we should tell them to get the freak out of our town. No, we can't do that. And why the hell not? Don't you hear the rumors? They say a shinobi is a part of their group. Naruto quietly stood, having heard enough, and having heard what he wanted to hear, he discreetly and silently moved towards the two in the back. Once he reached a close enough distance, one of them glanced in his direction. Calmly and silently Naruto moved towards two gentlemen whose backs were against the wall with cups in their hands. He quietly leaned on the wall in the same position, only he crossed his arms. Fortunately, he was close enough to listen in on their conversation, as they whispered among themselves. "Hey, when do you boss is gonna let us kidnap some of the women of this town?" one leered. Naruto felt a surge of disgust flow through him. He barely resisted the urge to growl. Altair pulsed in anger and bloodthirst. "I don't know when the boss is gonna let us have some fun, but all I know is I cannot wait." The other licked his lips in anticipation. Another surge of disgust went through Naruto's being at hearing the two men's conversation, but he forced himself to be calm. He would deal with them later, when the time presented itself. "So what time did the boss say to return to camp?" the bandit slurred. "Around sunset." "Why?" The other bandit merely pointed his finger out the window. "'Cause the sun is beginning to set, though not by much. I'd say the time is about 5 o'clock. "Yeah, good point. Alright, we'll finish our drinks, and then return to Camp K?" "I hear that." Naruto stoically waited for the two individuals to finish their drinks, idly listening in on more of their conversation. And the more he heard, the more disgusted he became. They were actually talking about raping the woman of this settlement. It disgusted him beyond comprehension. They earned his attention, however, when they began speaking of their boss. Apparently their boss was an A-rank missing nin from Konoha that joined Amigakure. He racked his memory for anyone he knew of that betrayed the leaf and joined AIM. Nothing came to mind. He was brought out of his thoughts when he noticed the two bandits stumbling out of the tavern. He waited until they left before he began leaving. After leaving the tavern, he looked around the streets before he caught sight of his two targets stumbling away from the small town. He slowly followed them, discreetly stopping and finding a hiding spot whenever one stopped and looked in his direction. Once they would begin moving again, he would immediately exit his hiding spot and slowly blend in with the crow while they remained oblivious to his discreet stalking. Soon they began to exit the town, and Naruto immediately took to the trees, trailing his targets from a distance. Every now and then one would stop and look behind them, before they would simply scratch their heads with a confused expression on their faces. Then they would shrug and continue on like nothing happened. This pattern continued for several minutes before they heard a rustling in a bush. One immediately drew the sheathed blade at his side and stabbed into the bush. The only thing that came out was a small brown rabbit, and it looked fearfully at the two men in front of it. The other laughed at his friend for being startled by a little rabbit. The other, angry at being laughed at, took his anger out on the rabbit, and promptly stabbed the bunny in the head repeatedly. After the 6th time, he gave a satisfied smirk, and resumed their walk back towards their camp. It was several minutes later did Naruto see their camp coming in sight range. Naruto nodded to himself, and he silently got closer to the two bandits via treetops. He silently took out 2 of his throwing knives from his pouch, and with incredible speed threw them with great precision. The knives hit their targets right in their throats. They gurgled for several seconds before they went limp. The blonde silently created 2 clones to dispose of the bodies, while he made several other clones to scout out the camp. He stoically and silently stayed in a tree only several meters away from the camp. He need not worry if they spotted him. With his gray-colored robes, and his hood obscuring his face, and golden blonde hair from view, he is almost like a shadow at night or sunset. After several minutes, the blonde realized that it might take longer for the clones to scout out the camp, so he jumped onto a tree branch, and laid himself against the bark of the tree, his right leg dangling off the branch, as he went to take a short nap. He jerked awake several minutes later. As his clones dispelled themselves, he silently hummed in thought. It seemed this bandit camp was not as large as it truly seemed. There were a total of 20 bandits, counting the 2 he killed. Apparently they were getting to rest up for the night, and they would raid the settlement tomorrow. He wouldn't let that happen, and it seemed his clones had taken it upon themselves to plant exploding tags around the camp, all of them placed in positions that would immediately take out most of them. As for the supposed shinobi in charge of these bandits, well, it seemed he was resting in his own tent, and he specifically told his men that he was not to be disturbed. Naruto's face immediately switched into an impassive expression. Slowly he brought his hands forward, he made a single hand sign, and silently flared his chakra slightly so as to not alert the shinobi in the camp. Several moments later the exploding tags detonated, and immediately the screams of the bandits sounded out, as some were being killed for being too close to the explosion or losing a limb or 2. Naruto instantly created several shadow clans to deal with any survivors, while he himself merely jumped into the center of the mayhem. He slowly moved towards the tent in which the shinobi was residing. Every now and then a bandit would attempt to stab him, but they were quickly killed by a clone. After that the clone would jump back into the fray and finish dealing with the surviving bandits. Just as he reached the tent in which the shinobi resided in, it opened, and the shinobi he was targeting slowly walked out. Naruto's eyes hardened, as he caught sight of the former Konoha shinobi. Former Konoha shinobi was wanted for stealing the Nidaime Hokage's Raijin. Naruto coldly spoke. Aoi raised an eyebrow before he looked around the battlefield, and he bore witness to Naruto's last clone finishing off the last of his men. Well, what do we have here? A little punk thinking he can beat me? What village do you belong to? He asked, before he spotted the Konoha insignias on the blonde's robes. Wait, don't answer that. It's obvious you're a Konoha nin. He smirked in a somewhat arrogant manner. Well, what are you gonna do now? Are you gonna run away now that you're dealing with an A-rank shinobi? He confidently said, almost as if he was expecting Naruto to do exactly that. Unfortunately for Aoi, he was dealing with Uzumaki Namikaze's Naruto. No, I'm here to kill you and retrieve Nidaime's famed Raijin, the blonde coldly and coolly said, as he slowly drew Altair from its sheath. Altair pulsed in anticipation, excited that it would be fighting with its wielder in a true fight. Aoi sneered, as he stared into Naruto's confident eyes. You think you can beat me, Gaki? I don't think so. I won't even have to use an end of any type to beat you, he arrogantly declared before he recklessly charged at the blonde. Naruto narrowed his eyes at Jonin's arrogance. Teach that pathetic and worthless human what it seems to cross us, Naruto, Kyuubi snarled, as he sneered at Aoi. Altair seemed to agree with Kyuubi, as it pulsed in anger, and a faint red glow emanated from the blade. I understand, Naruto thought, as he got into his Kenjutsu stance. He held Altair in front of him, with the tip of the sword hovering just above the ground. His legs were slightly spread apart, not too far, but not too close either, and his left hand was lazily behind his back. To most people the stance might be lazy, or somewhat arrogant. However, a true Kenjutsu master would see, the way he positioned his sword was so that he could deflect, block, and counter attacks coming from the left and right, while he could also do it from the front, as well. Yet it also allowed him to attack at all of those sides, as well. And the way he positioned his left arm, made it so he could be able to react almost instantly to any, and all attacks from behind. And finally the way he positioned his legs made it so he would be able to move quickly and efficiently. The stance was perfect for both attack and defense, while at the same time making others believe he was arrogant and overconfident. Unfortunately for Aoi, he was not a Kenjutsu expert, so it was completely understandable that he would be angry and enraged with Naruto's seemingly arrogant and lazy stance. He immediately whipped out a hilt of a sword from his shirt, and he channeled his chakra into it. Instantly the Tobirama's legendary Raijin sprang to life. The Konoha traitor charged at the blonde, who by now had already slightly raised his sword to deflect the Raijin. That pathetic sword won't stop the Raijin. Fool! Aoi arrogantly roared, as the two legendary blades clashed. Now Aoi was expecting Altair to be sliced through. However, he didn't expect Altair to successfully deflect the Raijin. Aoi's eyes widened, before he angrily glared at the blonde. That was a fluke, he yelled before he attacked the blonde again. The following Kenjutsu battle could hardly be classified as such. For every strike and feint he performed, the blonde seemed to be at least several steps ahead of him. Every strike was either blocked, deflected, and countered with. Nothing seemed to work against the blonde. His defense was just too strong. The counters, deflects, and blocks were executed perfectly, and with such grace, as well. Aoi roared in anger, as he performed a horizontal strike against the blonde. Again the blonde gracefully and perfectly reflected his strike, directing his arm into the ground instead. Aoi grit his teeth before he spun, and attempted to feign a vertical strike, but again it seemed like the blonde was expecting that, as he only tilted his sword to the left, and once again blocked Aoi's diagonal strike. His face was impassive the entire time. Aoi felt his anger increase, before he began to wildly perform a series of stabbing attempts to stab the blonde. Naruto merely tilted his head every time he aimed for his head, and he used Altair to deflect most of the strikes on his body. Why don't you die? Aoi roared in anger. This brat was mocking, taunting him. He could feel it. Who did the blonde think he was? He was Aoi Rokusho, a ranked criminal in Konoha, and Jonin in Amigakure. Who did this brat think he was? He was a nobody, a worthless brat with no talent. So why couldn't he hit him? Hold still, Aoi screamed again, as he swung the Raijin with more force, aiming towards the blonde's head. Naruto, having enough of Aoi's anger-induced strikes, blocked and countered by moving Altair to cut Aoi's hand. He succeeded, and Aoi winced. Using that chance, the blonde spun around, and gave Aoi several quick strikes to his upper body and legs, and finally, he ended his attacks with a stab into Aoi's left hand. Aoi roared in pain, as he attempted to hit the blonde with another horizontal strike. Naruto merely removed Altair from Aoi's injured hand, and gracefully slid back, avoiding the attempt to cut off his head. Aoi cradled his injured hand, and he glared maliciously at the blonde. Your stance is sloppy, your attacks are unrefined. You waste your movements by moving around so much, when you could just be patiently waiting for me to strike, and above all else you're impatient. The blonde lectured in an emotionless voice, though there was a hint of disappointment in it. Aoi glared at the blonde, as he rose to his feet. Don't lecture me, you pathetic wannabe. You can't beat me. The Raijin will taste your blood, fool. Aoi roared, as he jumped in the air, and descended upon the blonde, using his uninjured hand to hold Tobirama's Raijin. Naruto slightly shook his head in disappointment. This man wasn't a swordsman. No, he was just a thug fighting with a legendary weapon like it was a toy. It was time to end this once and for all. This fake swordsman didn't deserve to wield the Raijin. Altair, sensing that Naruto wanted to end the battle once and for all, glowed a dark red for a moment, before it dulled. Though there was only a slight red glow to it, Naruto swung Altair to meet with the Raijin. Aoi still believes that Altair clashing with Altair was just a fluke swung forward. As well, both blades met in a furious clash, before a slight cracking sound was heard. Aoi smirked, believing his opponent's blade was breaking. However, to his shock and horror, the Raijin's blade suddenly snapped in two, and the hilt was reduced into dust. He stared disbelievingly at the ashes of the Raijin in his hand. What? He uttered, still gazing upon the ashes in his hand. How is this possible? He raged, as he glared at the blonde in contempt. Naruto merely gave him an impassive stare, as he sheathed Altair in his sheath. He patted the sword on the eagle's head for such a good job. Altair pulsed in contentment. Do you realize what you've done? Aoi roared before pulling out an umbrella. I destroyed the Raijin, a blade which you stole from Konoha, and stole from the Senju clan. I'm certain that should the Nidaime Hokage be here, he would fully agree with my course of action. Naruto coldly spoke. I'll kill you, Aoi yelled before he threw the umbrella in the air, and performed several hand signs. Ninja art, send and shower. The missing nin roared before dozens began to shower themselves in Naruto's location. The hooded blonde merely narrowed his eyes before the wind around him picked up. They began to wildly plant themselves on the blonde's location, each time landing in the blonde's exact spot. Aoi laughed insanely, as he watched his opponent die by his signature technique. That's right, die, you piece of shit, he gleefully exclaimed. The rain stopped raining down on the blonde, and the dust that kicked up slowly began to fade away faster than normal. Aoi never paid any attention to that, however, as he grinned. Heh, that'll teach you to never freak with me, Hagak? His eyes widened to the size of dinner plates, however, as he saw Naruto standing in the same spot completely unharmed. All of the which had been launched were all scattered across the area around the blonde. How? Aoi trailed off, beginning to lose his voice. I got the idea after reading about the Yondaime Raikage's lightning armor, Naruto began, as the wind around him picked up once more. I created this little technique, as an inspiration for the Raikage's lightning armor. As you know, the Raikage's lightning armor allows him to have a perfect defense and a drastic increase in speed. The blonder opened his eyes for this part. So I figured, why not create a technique similar yet entirely different from the lightning armor? Wouldn't it create a type of armor just like the lightning armor, only instead of blocking all types of attacks, why not make it so that you could control the wind around you, to slow down projectiles, and all attacks? Once again the wind around the blonde made itself known. I call this little technique the wind field. With the wind field I can control all the wind in an area of my choosing. Air pressure, oxygen, wind strength. I control all that, and more in this area. The blonde finished explaining with a smirk. I developed this little technique when no one was watching me, and when I was all alone when I was training. No, that's impossible. I refuse to believe someone like you can beat me, Aoi roared before he blurred through multiple hand signs. Fire style. Grand fireball, the missing nin exclaimed, placing every ounce of chakra into the technique. A massively large fireball began to move towards the blonde's location. Naruto took a deep breath before he cleared his mind like how Pa instructed him on how to do it. His eyes snapped open not a second later, before he blurred through hand signs at A and BU level speeds. Water style. Water phoenix, the blonde roared, using his clan's most prized jutsu for the first time. To Aoi's utter shock and amazement, water from the atmosphere, began to converge around the blonde before it took shape into a massive phoenix the size of Kyuubi made entirely of water emerged from it. The water phoenix gave a mighty screech before it slammed itself into the fireball, not only causing the fireball to extinguish, but for a slight mist to settle in, as well. That level of water manipulation is said to only be a level on which Senju Tobirama achieved. Aoi yelled out in tired rage. During my time in Mount Maiboku, Pa made sure that my elemental manipulation would be better than anyone else's. The blonde vegan. He had me create over thousands of shadows after my senjutsu training, and got them to work on my water manipulation. Since my wind manipulation was already at an acceptable level, he wanted to make sure I was ready for the world. He began to walk towards Aoi, who had long since fallen over in exhaustion. He wanted my water manipulation to be on Tobirama's level, and I didn't want to displease him, so I complied. The blonde explained, as he knelt beside Aoi, and placed his hand to his throat. You will die now, Naruto tonelessly said. What are you gonna do? Choke me to death? The missing nin couldn't continue speaking, however, as he felt a sharp pain in his neck, almost like something had pierced it. He saw the blonde withdraw his hand, and to his shock and amazement, he saw a foot-long blade extended from the hooded blonde's bracer, before it retracted. Why did you betray Konoha? Naruto asked, curiosity seeping into his voice. Aoi, feeling his life begin to fade, saw no harm in revealing the blonde a bit of his character. Power, he answered. Power? Naruto asked, his eyes narrowing a bit. Yes, I left the village for power. Power is all that matters in this cursed shinobi world. Those with power thrive while those with power die, and are forgotten, and abandoned. If you have power, then you ultimately control all aspects of everyday life for people. Ideals, principles, dreams are all useless without power. With power you can do anything you want, he explained. You would abandon all of your principles for power? Naruto growled out. Aoi chuckled. Principle? His chuckles turned into coughs. What is principle, huh? Can it get a roof over your head? Can make your men all fall in line? Can it bring you the pleasures of the world? The missing nin resorted. Naruto merely looked away, as that was a question he couldn't answer. Aoi, seeing this, continued. The fact of the matter is, boy, is that power the only thing that matters in this world? Friends, love, and even family are all useless. Power is the only thing that matters, the Konoha traitor bitterly said. Naruto could only look at Aoi in a disappointing stare. Don't look at me like a boy, we're different from you. The difference is that I have no problem sitting on a throne with a bottle of sake in one hand, and the company of a woman in the other. Your hands will always be empty because of your foolish principles, Aoi slowly said before the light faded from his eyes. Naruto slowly brought his hand forwards, and placed it on Aoi's head. Your words were bitter, and may have held some truth to them, however it does not make them right. Yasuraka and I Nemiritami, may you rest in peace, Naruto said, as he shut Aoi's now lifeless eyes. You would show him respect even in death? Kyubi asked, as he awaited the blonde's response. The dead must be respected, Kyubi, no matter who they are, the blonde thought back, as he stood. Kyubi snorted, but accepted his answer. Naruto turned his head when he felt a hand on his shoulder, only to meet with Jiraiya's soft and assuring face. I saw and heard everything about Naruto, and I'm proud of you, Jiraiya said with a warm smile. Now get back to the hotel, Shiroi is waiting for you over there. I'll deal with this mess, the sage said, a gleam entering his eyes for a moment not that Naruto noticed, however. Naruto smiled back at his teacher before he nodded, and he silently began his trek to the hotel. Never seeing the shit-eating grin on Jiraiya's face. My student will finally become a man, Jiraiya blissfully thought with a perverted expression on his face. As Naruto entered his hotel room, he immediately felt like he was being stalked. It also didn't help that he heard what appeared to be small footsteps every now and then. But he merely assumed it was rats or something, so ignoring the feeling of impending doom he got to work on getting undressed. He first removed all his pouches, belt, and scarf. Once that was done, he removed Altair from his waist, and placed the sentient blade on the wall. Then he removed his robes, and by proxy his hood. He removed his hair from its spiked ponytail, letting his hair flow just past his shoulders in a spiked mess. He removed the dark orange mesh shirt he wore underneath his robes, revealing his muscled chest. He immediately felt like he was looked at like a piece of meat, but once again ignored the feeling. Next he removed his black leather boots. He unstrapped the leather strapping on the boots. After that it was a simple task of tugging them off. Then he removed his dark orange socks, and finally he removed his black pants, leaving him only in his ramen-themed boxers. Satisfied, he began moving towards the window to shut the curtains before he felt himself be yanked off the ground and thrown across the room, where he landed on his bed. He tried to stand up and face his attacker, only to have his arms pinned down, and for something to sit on him. He struggled for several moments, before a giggle reached his ears. He stopped. He knew that giggle. The moonlight shone through the window, revealing Shiroi. A grin was spread across her face, as he stared down on the blonde, and she hungrily licked her lips. Shiroi-chan, what are you doing? Naruto squeaked out. Don't fret, Naruto-kun. Let Shiroi-chan take good care of you tonight. Naruto only had thought running through his head best birthday ever. Their neighbors would be having noise complaints the entire night, not that they cared. The atmosphere was extremely tense, as Naruto bit his lip in frustration and slight despair. He uncertainly looked onto the field, and at the predicament he had placed himself in. Oh, why was Kami-sama torturing him with his mistake at the moment? You know, Naruto-kun, if you don't move I'll be an old lady by the time you're done, Shiroi lazily said, as she stared at the blonde who was practically sweating under the stress he was under. Dang it, Naruto frustratingly said, as he continued to muse on his next move. "Oh, for the love of Kami-sama, just make a move," Jiraiya shouted in an exaggerated manner, as he stared down at the game of chess the blonde and his lover were having. It had been an entire year since Naruto's first mission, and the night where Naruto and Shiroi became true lovers. After that night, Jiraiya had immediately gone into pervert mode, and asked for the specifics of the night. Naruto had merely blushed, and a glazed look entered his eyes, while Shiroi had a devilish smirk on her face. And the next morning their neighbors were complaining about noise that night. Jiraiya didn't know what exactly happened, but they must have gone all the way, and for nearly all night. Seeing as nearly the entire neighborhood was somewhat complaining about noise the entire night, Jiraiya couldn't stop giving Naruto a grin for an entire day, which annoyed Naruto to no end, but he dealt with it. Since then, Shiroi has made it a point that she wouldn't go to sleep unless it's with her favorite blonde in the bed with her. So now Naruto and Shiroi have always shared a bed, never being away from each other unless the blonde was sent on a mission. Seriously, if the two weren't inseparable before, well, they were practically glued together now. They had no problem displaying public affections, as well, holding hands, making out, a bit of groping here and there, all while having innocent looks on their faces. Jiraiya still didn't know how they could have such innocent faces when they groped each other. And then there were the marks that Jiraiya saw on both Shiroi's and Naruto's neck. When he asked what they were, Shiroi quickly explained the concept of the mate mark, as she called it. The mark had several features. The first was obvious. It let people know that they were taken, and that both Shiroi and Naruto belonged to each other forever. The second was that it made them both a little bit stronger, and Jiraiya confirmed it when all of Naruto jutsu and his strength became stronger by a small margin. Even Shiroi with her already monstrous strength got stronger. That slightly frightened the old sage. Seriously, with her natural strength she is almost as strong as Tsunade. Now her strength was truly on par with Tsunade. Jiraiya was a bit glad that the silvery white-haired vampire didn't train with them. If she had, there was no doubt in his mind that she would be a true juggernaut. The last and final thing the mark did was connect them in a sense. They would be able to feel each other's emotions and sense each other's thoughts. Not like mind reading, but more like they could get an idea of what they were thinking. Also, the mark connects their lives in a sense. If one dies or is close to death in a sense, then the other would instantly feel it. And should they die, the other will die with them. In a sense, it took the meaning "till death do us" to the trash can, and dumped it in a dumpster. Seeing as they would die together, and be together even in the afterlife. And finally, the mark lets them live just as long as their mate. Meaning if one of them was immortal, then the mark would make so that the other would live just as long as their mate. That made Jiraiya snort a bit. He knew the lifespan of vampires was as long as at least 200 years. Not to mention the Uzumaki clan were famous for their incredibly long lifespan, being able to live for at least 400 to 500 years. The healthier the Uzumaki are, the longer they live. The oldest Uzumaki ever recorded was said to have lived for 700 years before he finally died. So Naruto could live for a good long time, not to mention with the Kyuubi constantly keeping the blonde's body healthy. The blonde achieved in a sense what Orochimaru always dreamed of, immortality, with the only way of dying being in battle. Jiraiya told Naruto and Shiroi about this. The two were naturally both shocked beyond belief. Naruto was disheartened seeing as he would outlive all of his friends. Shiroi, sensing the blonde's turmoil, comforted him, and said that she would be by his side no matter what. Naruto appreciated Shiroi's words, and brightened up when he realized that Shiroi would live just as long as him. Jiraiya, despite the fact that his godson was basically immortal, was happy for the blonde. However, he quickly turned serious, and claimed that this should be a closely guarded secret, because should some like Orochimaru hear of this, then they would stop at nothing to kidnap the blonde. Both Shiroi and Naruto grimly agreed, and never brought up the topic again. And of course we can't forget the blonde's training. After 3 months, the blonde finally did it. He completed the Rasengan, and that made Jiraiya proud of what the blonde achieved. There were 2 versions of the completed Rasengan. The first was the wind style Rasengan. The technique looks fairly similar to an ordinary Rasengan, except it has 4 small white blade-like protrusions surrounding it, making look like a miniature. The concept of a completed wind style Rasengan would be the rotation and power of the Rasengan, and Naruto's wind nature chakra condensed into a stable sphere. Jiraiya immediately labeled it as a kinjutsu. The reason was simple. Not only did it attack on a molecular level, it damaged your own hand, though it was a slow process. It would eventually destroy your ability to use chakra. Jiraiya, along with Shiroi, forbade Naruto from using the jutsu, unless he somehow found a way to throw it. Naruto was a little disheartened by this. After all, it was an original technique he created, and now he couldn't even use it. However, when given the idea of throwing it, the blonde began to think, and eventually decided to put the idea to the test. 2 months later, he proudly looked upon his newest version of the Rasengan. His newest and his most powerful jutsu, the Raisin Shuriken. The Raisin Shuriken was a larger version of the wind style, Rasengan. The Raisin Shuriken was almost exactly like the wind style, Rasengan, except not only was it larger, and a bit stronger, it could also be thrown. Also, its larger spinning white blades madly spinning around made it look like a giant shuriken, hence the name Raisin Shuriken. Another feature was that the blades themselves could expand. The blonde gave his new jutsu a test run, and was pleased with the results. He immediately showed the fruits of his labor to Jiraiya and Shiroi, and the reactions were, as he expected. Jiraiya looked utterly shocked. Before a look of pure pride erupted from his face, he patted Naruto on the back and warmly said he did an excellent job. Shiroi, however, looked both amazed and incredibly happy for the blonde. She gave Naruto a deep kiss that lasted for several minutes. They quickly separated after they heard a perverted giggling. When they turned around, they saw Jiraiya writing in that damn notebook of his. Shiroi and Naruto merely looked at each other before they began to beat the perverted into a bloody pulp and burn that precious notebook in front of him. The perverted hermit cried out in despair at the loss of his notes. However, unknown to both Shiroi and Naruto, the notebook they burned was merely a fake one that Jiraiya switched with at the last second. Shortly after his completion of his Raisin Shuriken, the blonde took on more missions. However, the missions were not as interesting as he hoped. The missions were either B-ranked or a high-level C rank. They mostly consisted of destroying some bandits, dealing with low-level missing Nin. To put simply, Naruto got bored of those missions after 6 months. He couldn't really complain. After all, at least he got missions to do. He would go crazy just sitting around just waiting for something to happen. So he just silently completed his missions quickly so that he could spend time with Shiroi. That was his routine. Wake up, train, do some missions, and then spend most of his time with Shiroi. On some occasions he would enter his mindscape and speak with the Kyuubi. Of course, Kyuubi was a bit hostile towards him, but over time, with his visits, the Kyuubi began to warm up to him, if only slightly. Though Naruto thought that he and Kyuubi would become pretty good friends, something that Kyuubi repeatedly denied. Though the giant demonic fox couldn't help be glad that he was right in his observation. Kyuubi did think of him as a friend, and the son he never had. Not that he would ever admit it. He was of the Bijou, damn it. He had a reputation to uphold. If his siblings found out about his relationship with the blonde, then he would be a laughing stock. Well, the Hachibi and the Nibi would be happy for the fox, but the others, they would never let him live it down. Which was why the giant overgrown fox always made sure that the blonde would never mention their relationship with the other Jinchuriki. The blonde was a bit confused, but reluctantly agreed to Kyuubi's terms. As a show of thanks, Kyuubi offered to upgrade his hidden blade. Confused, the blonde asked how the hidden blade could be further upgraded. Kyuubi explained that the hidden blade could be upgraded with various adaptations. As an example, the Kyuubi upgraded the blade so that a metal hook would extend from the bracer should he flick his hands to the left. The blonde tested it out, and to his surprise, a hook-shaped blade extended. The blonde's mind went spiraling with limitless possibilities at what he could do with the hook blade. He even tried out one of his ideas when he was on a mission dealing with some bandits. He had to admit, spinning around and grabbing a bandit with his hook blade, and then flinging them across the field was awesome. Kyuubi thought it was hilarious, and Altair merely pulsed in confusion at why Kyuubi was howling with laughter when that happened. The blonde's training in Kenjutsu had been getting along splendidly. Jiraiya estimated that he was at least mid-level Kage in Kenjutsu. His Taijutsu was low-level Kage. However, it was his ninjutsu that was truly amazing, despite the fact that he only knew his own versions of the Rasengan and the limited jutsu he got from Yuzushiyo Gakure. The blonde was a high-level Kage, because of the power he could place in the jutsu. They had also begun to experiment with various weapons along the journey. He didn't like some weapons, some he liked, but never saw the point in mastering, seeing as they were really useful in battle. One weapon he enjoyed, and had begun using, was the rope dart. The rope darts consisted of long ropes about 3 to 5 meters long, with metal darts attached to one end. A dart was thrown with the opposite end of the rope anchored to an object, or held in one's free hand. There were many ways to use the rope darts. Either he could use them to literally drag an enemy to him if they were too far, or pull them off trees so that they wouldn't have the higher ground. However, Naruto's favorite way of using the rope dart was hanging an enemy from a tree or any other position. Kyuubi greatly enjoyed that method, if the happy-go-lucky megawatt smile he had was anything but. The last and final weapon the blonde loved was the crossbow. He took off some bandit he randomly killed. He saw the weapon and gave a test run. He was pleased with the results and promptly kept it. He only used it if a target was too far to hit with his throwing knives. He sealed all of the ammunition for the crossbow into a seal on the weapon and an auto-reload seal on it. Basically, it allowed him to shoot a crossbow. All he had to do was channel chakra into the seals, and there you have it. An arrow would appear from the storage seal, while the auto-reload seal would reload the crossbow for him. That way he wouldn't have to use his hand if in a battle. The blonde had also gained a reputation. People didn't know who he was underneath his hood, but the main thing that made him identifiable was the gray-colored robes he wore, and the fox images on his bracers respectively, and of course his sword Altair. Seeing no other sword had an eagle's head, as a pommel, and eagle wings, as the guard. The nickname everyone had come up for the blonde was the Fox Assassin, because of the fox-like grin he would give his clients, and the whiskers on his cheeks. The nickname pleased QB. Altair pulsed in agreement, as the nickname suited his wielder. During some of his missions the blonde had encountered some aspiring swordsmen, mainly rookie samurai. When they saw Naruto with Altair, they immediately proclaimed that a sword such as Altair's shouldn't be in the hands of an unhonorable shinobi, and thus tried to forcibly take the blade. That ticked Naruto off. He didn't give Altair to a bunch of low-level swordsmen, so he promptly handed their asses to them without so much as drawing Altair, since he didn't think they were worthy of gazing upon Altair's silver blade. Altair pulsed in agreement, as it didn't want the blood of a foolish swordsman to stain its blade. After an entire year of missions, training, and weapons experimenting, Jiraiya thought it was time to teach his young apprentice strategy. So for a few weeks he taught the blonde strategy, and how it could save you and your comrades' lives. Of course the perverted hermit knew that Naruto was the kind of person who made up plans and tactics on the fly. But one day, it wasn't gonna cut, which was why currently our blonde antagonist is playing chess against his lover. Hey freak you Ero-sensei, playing this game against Shiroi-chan is freaking difficult. Databeo, Naruto shouted in frustration. Or maybe you're just an idiot, Jiraiya stated, as he smirked at his student. Naruto fumed for a moment, before he returned his attention to the board game when he heard Shiroi clear her throat. Shiroi gave Jiraiya a warning stare, silently telling not to rile up her blonde lover, an unofficial husband. Jiraiya merely huffed, but gave a nonchalant shrug. He turned his attention back to the game of chess. When his godson moved his knight in a position that would let him capture Shiroi's king, should she move her own knight? Not a second after Naruto make his move, did Shiroi strike. Damn it, Kami-sama, why? Naruto wailed, as he stared at the board game. It was inconceivable. How was this possible? Shiroi now had her pawn right into his knight's path. Now the only thing he could do was move his king, and a pawn. However, it didn't matter, because if he moved his king in any direction, then Shiroi would ultimately capture the king. In a nutshell, he freaked on all sides. Oh, what could he do? Either way he lost. He had never felt so utterly defeated. Wait, maybe he could beat that Shiroi-chan, Naruto stated with a grin crossing his features. The reason? He had just placed his pawn in a position to capture one of her knights. However, his expression turned into utter despair when Shiroi merely moved her other knight to capture his king. Checkmate Naruto-kun, Shiroi said, a victorious grin crossing her face. No, Naruto wailed. I just died a little bit inside, Naruto muttered. Shiroi had a deadpan expression on her face. Wasn't he taking this a little too seriously? Jiraiya merely frowned lightly. Oh come on, it can't have been that hard, he stated. The blonde merely glared at the toad Sanin. How about you try playing her in chess? Databeo, damn that verbal tick, Naruto shouted. Jiraiya smirked slightly. Alright, move aside, I'll show how this game is really played, he cockily said. Naruto merely huffed before he stood from his chair, and let his perverted teacher take his seat, while he reset all of the pieces. After that the battle of minds between Shiroi and Jiraiya began. 4 minutes later, a defeated Jiraiya stared at the game in pure disbelief. No, how is this possible? The author of Ika exclaimed, as he gazed upon Shiroi's bishop capturing his king. No, I refuse to believe this, he yelled, as he shook his head in denial. I won Arrow GG, deal with it, Shiroi stated. Naruto merely gave Jiraiya a look of understanding. After all, Shiroi had just basically handed their asses to them on a silver platter in the chess game. Jiraiya wailed in despair for a few moments, while Shiroi gave a small sweat drop. Seriously, weren't they taking this too seriously? After wailing in despair for a few moments, Jiraiya suddenly stood straight, with a grin on his face. As you two know, it's been 2 years since our journey, Jiraiya began. Both Shiroi and Naruto silently looked at the perverted sage, as he spoke. Naruto, you have learned much during our training trip, and I must say I could be more proud of you than I am now. The blonde puffed his chest out in pride, as he gave his teacher a look of appreciation for his training and guidance. The white-haired hermit turned to Shiroi. Shiroi, despite the fact that you never really expressed an interest in learning shinobi arts, and instead focused on mastering what you already knew, I can't help but feel a sense of pride as I look upon you, he stated. Shiroi gave him a beaming smile, before she contently placed herself at Naruto's side. Instantly Naruto wrapped his arm around her waist. Jiraiya smiled at the action before he spoke. I'm proud of you both, and I'm happy for the both of you. And now we only have 1 more year of this trip together, he stated. Both lovers constantly smiled at Jiraiya. Even Kyubi cracked a slight smile on his face, however it was quickly wiped away. He was the king of the bijou, and kings didn't smile. They smirked. With that in mind, QB gave a smirk, though it resembled a smile more than anything. It was a scary, huge, demonic smile, but a smile nonetheless. Even Altair pulsed in both contentment and happiness. However, all of their smiles instantly disappeared with Jiraiya's next words. Now if only you two could give me more inspiration, by getting active tonight, he leered. Both Shiroi and Naruto looked at each other, before they glanced at Jiraiya, and they silently came to an agreement. They cracked their knuckles, and slowly, and menacingly stalked towards the perverted hermit. Jiraiya nervously chuckled. Too much? He asked. His only answer was two fists coming towards him at breakneck speeds. QB merely shook his head at their antics. Humans are so freaking strange. He concluded. Altair pulsed in agreement, while our favorite blonde and his lover were beating the perverted hermit, and shortly after speaking about how to finish the rest of their final year on their journey. Let us take a visit towards Konohagakure. The streets were bustling with life, as dozens of villagers mingled about, selling their items, haggling with others, working deals, and of course gossiping about latest news and something. However, one individual stood out from the rest. Her short bright pink hair was a dead giveaway as to who the girl was. Her bright green eyes looked at the village with a contentment expression. To those who do not know who this girl was, she was Harino Sakura, Naruto's ex-teammate and former crush. The recently promoted Chunin had just got her shift at the hospital done, and now she chose to just wander around until she found something to do. Her appearance had hardly changed, with slight changes you would notice, but you wouldn't really notice unless you actually looked closely. I'm pretty sure everyone knows how she looks in Shippuden. After several minutes of wondering, she sighed, as nothing caught her interest. However, her ears perked when she heard the voice of her childhood friend Yamanaka Ino. Hey Sakura, Ino greeted, as she stood in front of her childhood friend with her hands on her hips. Hey Ino, how's it been? The pink-haired girl greeted with a smile. A bit boring, but other than that not much else. Ino shrugged. Sakura gave a slight grin. Yeah, it has been pretty boring around here, hasn't it? It kinda makes me wish back to the old days, back when Sakura stopped herself saying more, seeing as she was still a bit sore about the subject of her team. Ino, seeing Sakura become disheartened, quickly changed the subject. I heard Hinata is still acting as strange. Strange was an understatement. After several weeks following Naruto's departure for his training journey, she had become snappish for some strange reason, and every time she saw something in a silvery white color, she would snap, and just destroy in a fit of rage. Everyone became wary of the Hyuga after that. However, a year earlier, she again went into a fit of rage, and destroyed dozens of white-colored objects. Ever since then, she had become snappish when something white was related, and a lot of things were white these days. Nobody knew just why she would go into a fit of rage, but they wisely chose not to mention anything white near her. I wonder what's wrong with her, Sakura started with a slight frown. Everyone was worried about the Hyuga, but they couldn't do anything since she was always fine unless she saw something white, or, as so far even resembled white hair. Then she would go into a frenzy. I know. I asked my father to speak with Hayashi-sama about Hinata, but Hayashi-sama merely said that he didn't know what was making his daughter so angry, Ino said with a frown on her features. They quickly changed the subject into something else. They spoke about the latest gossip in the village, the missions they've been on, their training, and of course the latest fashion. Then Ino randomly brought up the subject of a certain blonde whiskered-faced blonde. So how do you think Naruto's doing? Ino asked. Naruto? He's probably training with Jiraiya-sama to get stronger, that's for sure, the pink-haired girl said with a chuckle. Yeah, you're right. You know, it's strange. I actually miss my fellow blonde, the platinum blonde-haired girl said. Yeah, in a way I miss him too, Sakura agreed. So, do you think he got handsome? Ino started with a grin crossing her features. Sakura raised an eyebrow at Ino. This is Naruto we're talking about. Even if he did become a bit handsome, I bet he would still be the same old knuckle-headed Naruto from the academy days. Sakura deadpan. Per Sakura, you have no idea how wrong you are. Oh come on Sakura, people change especially after 2 years. Come to think of it, doesn't he have 1 more year of training left? Ino asked. I just don't see it, Ino. And to answer your question, yes, he does have 1 year left of training, Sakura stated. I do know one thing. Ino began. If Naruto is as handsome as I believe him to be, then I am going for him, she finished. Not a second after she spoke that sentence, she felt an oppressive aura engulf her. She felt cold and helpless, almost as if her very soul was being slowly and painfully being forced out of her body in an agonizing manner. She wanted to curl up into a ball and cry, but she couldn't even move. The entire world around her was shut out. The only thing she could hear was her breathing. Visions of her death came to pass, and each one more gruesome and bloody than the last. Regaining some of her motor functions, she could only slightly lift her head, and she caught a vision of pink-slitted eyes, glowing a menacing pink color. The eyes glared at her with a feral rage so hot that she could feel her skin being melted off. She suddenly heard a voice, and the tone of the voice told her she had done something incredibly stupid. She didn't even know what she did. "He is mine," the voice hissed out. Ino swallowed a lump in her throat. The voice was female, and it spoke in a tone so cold that her entire body, even her bones, were chilled to the core. "What?" Ino stuttered in a small, fearful voice. "He is mine," the female voice yelled. "Who is yours?" the platinum blonde fearfully questioned. Flashes went through her mind. Flashes of a girl with silvery white hair and pink slitted eyes. Flashes of how the girl first met Naruto, their time together, their first date, the day they became a couple, a glimpse of the night of when they became true lovers, and the time they spent together after that night. "He is mine," the voice dangerously hissed. Ino gulped. "Are you talking about Naruto?" she stuttered. Ino only had one thought going through her head at the moment. Just what the freak is happening, she thought. She heard the voice almost purr in approval of her answer. That's when she realized that whoever this voice belonged to, it belonged to the girl in the visions. She can't lie. She noticed how happy her fellow blonde was when he was with the silvery white-haired girl, and she saw how the girl was equally happy with the blonde. And somehow, the girl was able to project an astral mind projection of her mind, and placed it into her mind. Somehow, the girl either heard or felt Ino's words, meaning this was all very real. But it was also a matter of mind. Ino felt a bit of her confidence return. After all, she was a Yamanaka. Yamanaka specialized in mind techniques, so this should be a piece of cake, right? "You speak as if Naruto was a possession," Ino stated, even if it was a bit hypocritical. Eerie silence was Ino's answer. It was the calm before the storm. Despite the feeling of impending doom, Ino continued. "I don't know who you are exactly," Ino began, "but you speak as if Naruto were an item. Do you even really love him?" Ino finished. She knew she was stepping out of line. After all, she saw the vision. She saw how happy the girl and the blonde were. But poor Hinta had a crush on the blonde since the academy. She only said she would go for the blonde, a test run of sorts. If Ino would truly fall in love with her fellow blonde, then all bets were off. And if the relationship didn't work out at all, then she would break up with him, as gently as possible. Unfortunately for Ino, astral projection of Shiroi did not like Ino questioning her love for Naruto at all. Ino uncertainty looked around, not sending anything. After several moments, she thought astral projection had just left, but her breath hitched in her throat, as she felt a malicious aura behind. If possible, Ino felt more cold and helpless than she did the first time. She fearfully and slowly turned her head behind her, and the astral projection of Shiroi was glaring at her with a feral rage in her eyes. Her mouth was set into a vicious and furious snarl, revealing her lengthening fangs. How dare that platinum blonde question her love for Naruto? She felt her rage increase as the words echoed in her mind. She loved Naruto more than anything, and yet this slut dare say she didn't love him. "Oh, Shiroi will enjoy breaking her. I am going to break you," the astral Shiroi hissed. Ino leg twitches, and that was all Shiroi needed, as she suddenly lunged at her with the intent to tear her head off her shoulders. Ino saw her fangs gleam, and she screamed. "Ino! Ino!" Sakura shouted before she slapped her childhood friend across the face. "Sakura?" Ino stuttered before she frantically looked around the area. All she saw was the faces of other villagers gazing at the two kunoichi worriedly. Ino looked back at Sakura, to see concern in her eyes. "Ino, what happened?" "You just suddenly froze up for a moment, then suddenly collapsed and screamed," the pink-haired girl said. Ino gave one final sweep of the area, making sure that the girl wasn't there, before she gave Sakura a nervous smile. "I'm fine, Sakura. Just had a strange daydream," she said, hoping Sakura would take the hint. Sakura gave into a skeptical look. After all, you just don't randomly in the middle of the street. But she relented, however, when she caught sight of the pleading look she was giving her. "Alright, Ino, I guess you're fine." She couldn't continue speaking, however, as Ino suddenly shot, and gave her a grateful smile. "Thanks, Sakura. I'll see you later," she said before she quickly left. She wanted to speak with her father about what happened, and if it were really possible to have mental abilities like she just witnessed. Sakura watched Ino walk away with a look of worry and concern. She sighed. Once Ino wasn't in her sight anymore. She looked up towards the sky, only to see it darkening somewhat. Night was slowly coming, and the sun was just setting over the horizon. With nothing else to do, the pink-haired female decided to head home, though she couldn't help the feeling that Ino was hiding something important. She only hoped it wouldn't cause any problems. Per Sakura, again, you don't realize just how mistaken you are. It will be a problem just for certain people. Tsunade watched the sun set over the horizon with a blank face. She had by some miracle managed to finish her paperwork, and now she was waiting for Jiraiya's first report in 2 years. It was an agreement they made. Jiraiya would send her a report of Naruto's skills in 2 years, thus she would be fully aware of how powerful her surrogate son was. and then the perverted sage would teach Naruto strategy for the last year. And now the female Hokage would finally get the report of how powerful Naruto was. She couldn't stop the feeling of anticipation welling up inside her. She would finally know how strong her surrogate son was after 2 long years. How long has it been since she last saw the blonde's bright and warming smile? How long has it been since she last felt this motherly instinct threaten to override her? Shizen was like one of her children, as well, but the female brunette was at least 25. As such, she couldn't let out her mother instinct with Shizen, as she was a grown woman. However, Naruto was another story altogether. He wasn't even 18 yet. As such, he was still somewhat of a child, meaning it was okay for her to act motherly with the younger blonde. A smile crossed her features. That brat, even when he wasn't here, he could still cause these mother feelings to well up inside her. A small poof of smoke caught her attention. She turned her head, only to meet with the messenger toad known as Kosuke. "Hey, are you Senju Tsunade?" Kosuke asked. Tsunade merely nodded her head. "Message from Jiraiya," the red toad stated, as he handed a scroll towards the busted blonde. Tsunade accepted the scroll with a nod of thanks. The toad blinked. That was the first time someone had thanked him when he delivered a message. It felt nice being appreciated, damn it. Messengers deserve some respect, as well. Kosuke gave Tsunade a short welcome before he disappeared in a puff of smoke. Tsunade eagerly opened the scroll to read its contents. Halfway through, her eager expression turned into disappointment. The letter stated that he would explain all about Naruto's abilities in person a year from now, as he believed it would be best. Seeing, as both of them knew that some messages from her desk had been mysteriously disappearing and being replicated, and then ending up back in the desk. Tsunade knew they were replicated, seeing as the handwriting was never the same. Tsunade suspected Danzo's route to be responsible, but she couldn't get any evidence. Danzo was slippery for sure. However, the end of the note caught her attention. "Naruto got a future wife?" She blinked once, twice, and a third time, before a massive grin erupted from her face. Naruto, her surrogate son, had finally given up on Sakura. She had always thought that Sakura was all wrong for the blonde, seeing as she almost constantly berated him on almost every occasion. She kept her opinion to herself, however, as she knew the blonde was more stubborn than anyone. Trying to convince Naruto to do something he didn't like was like trying to get a freaking brick to talk. It was impossible. Believe me, I tried, lol. But this Jiraiya apparently got Naruto to forget the pink-haired girl, and he had fallen so deeply in love with her that he completed most of his training and missions so quickly so that he may spend time with her, and the girl returned his feelings quite eagerly as well. She hadn't seen two people this in love since Minato and Kushina. A nostalgic smile came upon her face. Hearing about the two made her remember Kushina, Minato, and Dan, the man she had fallen in love with. One thing was for sure, Tsunade couldn't wait to meet Shiroi. While Naruto, Shiroi, and Jiraiya were finishing the remainder of their training journey, let us take a visit to an old rival and former brother figure to the blonde. Blood-red eyes with 3 slowly rotating tomo were all one could see in the darkness of the room. The door to the right opened, and Yakushi Kabuto stood in the doorway, giving his trademark taunting and smug smirk. The crimson Sharingan eyes glanced at the silver-haired man, before they were trained back onto the wall he had been staring at for the past several hours. "Good morning, Sasuke-kun. Orochimaru-sama is requesting you. Your pet has killed another one of our subordinates," Kabuto smoothly said, taunting, and smug smirk still crossing his features. Sasuke merely gave a low grunt, before he responded after several moments of silence. "I told you all before," Sasuke began. "I don't care what Tia does," he finished, "and she isn't my pet." He snapped shortly after. He gave Kabuto a cold glare, before going back to staring at the wall. "That's too bad, Sasuke-kun, because Orochimaru-sama has been thinking about cutting off all ties with her," Kabuto said, trying to get a reaction out of the Uchiha. "Like I said before, what he does to her is of no concern to me," the brunette coldly stated. It had been 3 years since Sasuke's defection from Konoha, 2 years of training almost non-stop, and he was pleased with the results. For the first year, he worked on increasing his skills on ninjutsu and taijutsu. He was proud to say that his skills on ninjutsu were low-level kage, while his taijutsu was on high-level anbu. For the second year they worked on his genjutsu. He was extremely pleased to say his genjutsu skills were high-level kage, on par with Uchiha Itachi, his older brother, and the one he wants to kill most. Just thinking about Itachi caused a surge of hatred to run through his very being. He had done what Itachi said. He allowed his hatred for him to fester and grow. His hatred for Itachi knew no bounds. He wouldn't stop until Itachi was dead, and he would kill anyone who stands in his way. Especially if a certain whiskered-faced blonde tries to stop him, then he would destroy him utterly. And finally, his last year they worked on his newfound interest in kenjutsu, and he was proud to say that his kenjutsu skills were at least high-level A rank, borderline S rank. With his newfound power, he believed he was ready to finally kill Itachi. Oh, so you don't care what Orochimaru-sama does to her? Kabuto said, a small frown on his face. Orochimaru wants Sasuke to breed with the girl after all. If they breed, then that means more Sharingans in Orochimaru's possession. That's right, so do what you want with her, Sasuke stated, as his Sharingan eyes morphed back into his normal onyx black color. Kabuto shrugged, and opened his mouth to speak, only to stop, and jump back, as the door slammed open, nearly hitting him in the process. Uchiha, get off your fat lazy ass, and get me some damn food, a female voice angrily demanded. Sasuke merely glared coldly at the girl who was unfazed by his glare. The girl had long dark pink hair flowing down her back, her bangs swayed messily, and narrowly into her eyes, but they didn't seem to bother her in the slightest. Two long bangs framed her face, and stopped at her stomach. Her dark blue eyes were set into an angry and cold glare, as she stared at the Uchiha. Her eyelashes were slightly curved, and her nose was small, but a bit sharp, as well. She wore a black skin-tight shirt that hugged her generous bust, and an unzipped leather jacket over it. And the final thing to her attire was the dark blue shorts she wore, with a blood-red belt around her waist that held several pouches. All in all, she was a beautiful girl. But what would really catch someone's attention were her pointed ears, and the black feathered wings on her forearms, along with the bird-like feet with razor-sharp talons she had, and her light blue skin. This girl was named Tia, and she was a harpy. Don't look at me like that, you bitch-ass Uchiha. Now get off your arse, and give me some freaking food now, she sneered. Did he forget to mention that she had a bad mouth, and a very dangerous temper? They met during the time when he and Orochimaru were moving to another one of his bases. He saw her snatch and eat a wolf from the ground. When she saw him, she immediately tried killing him. She almost did too, but he managed to survive, albeit barely. However, they stopped fighting when they saw the hatred in each other's eyes. Curiosity getting the best of, he asked who she hated. She glared at him for several minutes before she replied that she hated an old friend of hers that killed her brother. She glared at him for several more minutes before she asked who he hated. He replied that he hated his older brother for murdering his entire clan. They gained an understanding that day. They weren't friends, or they were far from it in fact. However, they understood each other's hatred, and, as such, they were able to tolerate each other, so they tolerated the other's presence. However, should they have to, they would abandon each other without any remorse. Orochimaru was fascinated with the dark pink-haired harpy, and tried to experiment on her multiple times. That is, until Tia threatened to rip his crotch off with her talons. Orochimaru, if possible, paled slightly before he backed off, and never tried to experiment on her again. Another thing was that every once in a while a new subordinate would make a comment about her being Sasuke's toy. Tia immediately killed them in a gory and bloody mess until nothing was left but a smear on the wall. She made it very clear that she hated Sasuke, a sentiment shared by the Uchiha. I am not going to give my breakfast, Sasuke said, making sure to keep his steaming hot breakfast in his sight. Of course, that didn't stop Tia from treating Sasuke like her slave. Bitch, you're not even eating, Tia said, a scowl working on her face. Sasuke's eyes twitched. Damn, she was annoying. I'm waiting for it to cool off, he coolly replied. Tia raised an eyebrow, as she stared blankly at the Uchiha. You're a little bitch, aren't you? You can't even handle a hot breakfast. Damn, you're such a bitch. How you survived this long in the world I'll never know, she stated. She also took every chance she got to belittle the Uchiha. Sasuke twitched. Was this how Naruto felt when Sakura belittled him? If so, then his respect for the blonde went up a little. Well, I hope you're done killing our subordinates, Tia? Kabuto questioned, smirking back on his face. Tia looked at Kabuto in wonder, as if astonished to see him alive. Oh, the prissy bitch is actually alright. I was worried that your precious Orochimaru-sama had stretched your ass out too much last night, she said in a shocked tone. Sasuke took a sadistic glee when he saw Kabuto twitch. Tia had that effect on everyone. She would annoy any and everyone she met, especially Orochimaru. Heck, Sasuke thinks that she purposely irritates everyone just to get a rise out of them. What are you smirking about, bitch? Give that freaking breakfast you have there now, the harpy demanded, as she whirled around at Sasuke. Sasuke twitched, before he sighed in annoyance. Silently he handed his breakfast to the harpy. For some reason he lost his appetite. Tia looked at the food with glee, before she stopped, and scowled towards the Uchiha and Kabuto. What? Sasuke asked, noticing the scowl, while Kabuto merely raised an eyebrow. I'm not eating in the same room as you two, so, get the freak out, she slowly demanded, lacing her words with killing intent. Kabuto shrugged before he silently left the room, and waited by the door. He knew what was to come. I'm not leaving. This is my room after all, Sasuke coldly stated. A look of rage, fury, and hatred came upon Tia's face before she growled menacingly at the dark-haired boy. Bitch, I don't care if you're the freaking king of the world. When I tell you to do something, you do it. Do you understand me, bitch? She roared before her figure blurred, and Sasuke was suddenly thrown out of the room at high speeds, and he landed face first into a wall. "Next time don't freaking question me, bitch," Tia sneered before she roughly slammed the door. Sasuke slowly stood, his entire form shaking in unrestrained fury, as his Sharingan eyes glared hatefully at the door to his room. "She is such a loose cannon," Kabuto muttered. Sasuke grunted, before he silently stood, and slightly limped down the halls. Soon his goal, no, his ambition would become a reality. Soon he would kill Orochimaru at his weakest, and then hunt down Itachi. Soon he would avenge his clansmen. Soon all that hard work and training would finally pay off. He just had to find the perfect chance to strike. And he knew when the perfect chance would present, all he had to do was be patient. After all, patience was very rewarding. There was nothing but darkness in the cave. No amount of light could be seen, only darkness. A massive humanoid statue was in the middle of the cave with its arms held out, and its palms opened. A single figure phased into existence on one of the fingers, shortly joined by another shorter figure. The shorter one opened her orange eyes. "Conan, did you contact them?" the taller asked in a deep and dead tone, as he slowly opened his silverish-purple eyes with multiple rings circling the pupil. The shorter figure gave a short nod beside him, and she spoke a much softer voice confirming she was female, although her voice had an emotionless tone much like her male counterpart. "Yes, Pain-sama, they will arrive shortly," she spoke. Pain merely nodded his head slightly before they began to wait for the rest of their group's arrival. They didn't have to wait long, as slowly several more figures began phasing into existence much like he did. The only thing visible about them were their eyes. Well, it's been a while since we gathered like this. It's that time already, huh?" the tallest of the males asked, his beady eyes looking at all of them with mirth, as he gave them all a shark-like grin. His partner, the shorter male beside, merely opened his crimson-red eyes, while 3 spinning tomos slowly rotated across the pupils. The crimson-eyed individual began in an emotionless drawl. "We did not come here to banter. No doubt Leader-sama has called to assign us our targets," he finished. Kisame gave a mirth chuckle. "Sorry, Itachi-san. It's just that I'm strangely excited," he grinned. "I just want our target assigned already so I can get back to working on my art." Another spoke, his blue eyes sparkling at the thought of his art. "Deidara, shut up. The longer we make this meeting, the longer my spies are forced to wait. And I do not like to keep people waiting," his hunched-back partner gruffly stated, as his eyes glared coldly at his partner. "And your so-called art is nothing compared to mine," he said shortly after. "Sorry about that, Sasori-dana," Deidara said before Sasori's last sentence registered in his head. "What did you say about my art?" "True art is a bang, not some useless puppet like the ones you create," he balefully stated. "And I told you, Deidara, true art is eternal," Sasori stated in a matter-of-fact tone. Deidara bristled at the comment. "Ha, you are entertaining, you know that?" another member said, his red eyes filled with amusement, and an arrogant look in his eyes. "Haiden, shut up. Your voice irritates me," his partner coldly stated. His green eyes with red scare looked at his partner with an apathetic glare. Though if you looked closely you would be able to see the amount of disdain he held for his partner. "Hey freak you Kakuzu," Haiden angrily exclaimed, as he pointed a finger at his partner. "If you want to keep that finger, then I suggest you lower it to Haiden," Kazuka coldly said, his eyes narrowing icily and dangerously. Haiden merely scoffed. "And what are you gonna do about it?" he said with an almost manic grin on his face. "I'll kill you without any remorse," the bounty hunter stated. "Enough," Pain calmly stated, though there was a certain edge in his tone that everyone immediately noticed. Instantly all arguing and conversation stopped. "You are here to receive your assignments, not bicker among yourselves," Pain said, his voice carrying across the entire area. Everyone stood at attention. Everyone knew that when Pain was speaking like the way he was now, you had to listen. It was a rule. If you broke it, well, the last person who broke that rule was killed in an extremely painful manner, having your soul slowly ripped from your body while stabbing you with all sorts of weapons, and then bringing you back to life to repeat the process, made Pain quickly feared among the Akatsuki. "Haiden, Kakuzu, do we have enough funds to assist us in our objectives?" Pain asked, glancing at the bounty hunter and Jashinis. Kakuzu straightened. "We have more than enough, Leader-sama," he indifferently said. "Excellent," Pain replied before he turned his attention towards the Akatsuki member who hadn't spoken since the meeting. "Zetsu, tell us the information you have on the Jinchurikis," Pain ordered. Zetsu, the Akatsuki's spy, straightened now that all attention was on him now. "The Ichibi Jinchuriki is now the Kazakage of Tsunade, and rarely ever leaves the village. The Nibi Jinchuriki has been completing missions all around the Land of Lightning lately," Zetsu began, then his other half took over from there. "The Sanbai is still reforming, but it won't be long now before it reforms completely. The Yambi Jinchuriki is currently wandering the Land of Earth, while the Gobi Jinchuriki is living in a cottage near the border between the Land of Earth and Fire. It will be easy to capture them both, seeing as the Tsuchikage doesn't care about them," Black Zetsu stated, before his white half took over. The Rokubi Jinchuriki currently residing is a small castle near the border of the land of water and rain. The Nanabai is residing in Takigakure for the moment, White Setsu informed, as his black half took over the rest. The Hachibi Jinchuriki is still locked away in Kumo, so trying to capture it would prove to be difficult. And the Kyubi Jinchuriki is still with Jiraiya of the Sannin, Black Setsu finished. Pain nodded at the spy, before he turned his attention to his subordinates. Your targets are, as follows. Sasori and Deidara will head towards Suna, and capture the Ichibi Jinchuriki. Kakuzu and Haiden will work on capturing the Nibi Jinchuriki. Zetsu will spy on the other nations, and inform us if they plan to retaliate, and take their Jinchuriki back. Pain said before he turned his attention to Kisame and Itachi. Itachi and Kisame, you will remain on standby. However, should you get the opportunity, I want you to capture the Kyubi Jinchuriki. But is that only a secondary objective, understood? Itachi and Kisame nodded at Pain's plan and course of action. Any questions? No one spoke, as they all understood their mission objectives, and they knew full well that they had to bring the Jinchuriki alive. However, that didn't mean they weren't allowed to use lethal methods if they used their Biju's chakra. Dismissed, Pain ordered. Everyone immediately phased away from existence, eager to get their assignments done. Pain and Conan remained in the darkness of the cave for what seemed like an eternity, before Pain closed his eyes and spoke. I know you are there, he calmly and emotionlessly drawled. It was silent for a few moments, before slowly a single fully mature Sharingan eye opened in the darkness. So now the hunt for the Jinchuriki begins, the figure stated. His voice was deep, rough, cold, and nonchalant, as he spoke. I wonder how much the Kyubi Jinchuriki has grown? The man idly mused. You've taken an unusual interest in the Kyubi Jinchuriki, Pain muttered before he opened his eyes, and stared indifferently at the swirling masked face of Tobi. Tobi shrugged. Can you blame me? After all, not only is he the Jinchuriki of the most powerful Biju, he is also the son of the Yondaime Hokage, Tobi explained. If anything, I expect the boy to already be a S-class shinobi, he finished. It doesn't matter. In the end he will know Pain just like the rest of the world, and an era of true peace can be born. Pain declared confidence in his voice with a hint of arrogance. Fool, this world is nothing but a cruel and cold reality. There is no true peace, there is only Project Tsuki no Mi, Tobi thought. Do what you will, Pain. But remember, I am watching, Tobi warned before he slowly vanished in a swirling vortex from his eye. After several moments of silence, Pain turned his head towards Conan. Is something wrong, Conan? The ringed-eyed man questioned. Conan gave the area a quick scan, confirming that Tobi was gone before she spoke. I don't trust that man Nagato, she answered, using his true name, as they were now alone. Pain merely nodded his head at Conan's words. Nor do I. However, his help is greatly required if we are to capture the Biju, and work our way towards true peace. By showing this world true pain, the Akatsuki leader declared. And I will stand with you every step of the way, Nagato, Conan declared. Pain said nothing, he merely phased himself out of existence. Conan followed shortly after. They never noticed the black version of Zetsu melting into the wall. Shiroi constantly watched, as two children played eagerly in the backyard of their home. The amount of happiness on their faces was impossible to fathom, and the smile on her face was one of love and contentment. The first child, the boy, had faded whisker marks on his cheeks, shoulder-length spiky golden blonde hair with streaks of silver in them, bright blue eyes with tinge of pink in them, and a slitted pupil. Also, if you were to look closely at the boy's grin, then you would be able to see tiny fangs in his teeth. He wore black shirt, with the Uzumaki spiral on the back, blue shorts, and on his feet he wore red sandals. The second child, a girl, also had faded whisker marks on her cheeks, long silvery white hair, with golden blonde streaks flowing through them, bright pink eyes with a twinge of blue in them, and a slitted pupil, as well. Like her male counterpart, she had fangs in her teeth if you were to look closely. She wore a yellow sundress, with a red Uzumaki spiral on the front of the dress. On her feet, she wore green sandals on her feet. The two children played happily together, and that made her smile. Feeling a presence behind, she turned her head, only to meet with the face of her husband and lover. He really hadn't changed that much. His golden blonde hair was still as unkempt and spiky as the day he was born. His bright blue eyes regarded the children warmly and love, and his whiskered face was still as adorable and cute as she remembered. He didn't wear his robes today, something she was glad for, though he still had Altair in its sheath by his side. Naruto smiled at Shiroi lovingly, before he planted a kiss on her cheek. That made her flush a bit. The two children noticed, and began to run towards them with their arms spread out for a hug. The children said two words that made her entire being warm up with warmth and joy. Tu-chan, Ka-chan. Shiroi slowly opened her eyes from the pleasant and wonderful dream she was having, though a blush worked away on her face, just thinking about the two children she saw in the dream. They were so wonderful, and beautiful to look upon. Even if they didn't exist yet, they already found a special place in her heart, much like Naruto. Speaking of the blonde, she turned her gaze from the window and unto his peacefully sleeping self. His hair is unkempt, and if possible even messier than it was before. His lips were set into a peaceful and content smile as he held her close to him. She blushed lightly, remembering that they were currently sleeping in the nude because of their activities last night. By Kami, the amount of stamina the blonde had was incredible. Even though they had sex nearly every night whenever they wanted to make love or when they felt lust for each other, it still boggled her how much stamina he had. She blushed as she nearly gave a tired yawn. Again, they spent nearly the entire night being active. But it was morning now, and, as such, it was not proper for a lady to sleep in. Now she just had to find a way to wake up her mate. She grinned mischievously as she thought up of a way to wake. Slowly she gave a soft peck to his chest and worked her way up from there, trailing kisses along the way. She gave several pecks to his chin and lips before she moved her way to his neck. She grinned when she heard pleasurable groans coming from him. She stopped and gave a victorious smirk as she stared at the mark on his neck. It was a symbol that he belonged to her, and her alone. The mark on her own neck meant the same. She was his, and his alone, and that was the way she wanted it. She gave a slight lick to his neck, right along the mark, and she grinned in glee when he unconsciously gave a small groan. Without any further debate, her fangs began to extend, and she bit down on his neck, though she kept her eyes half open so she could see his awakening. 3 seconds later, Naruto's eyes opened. He gave a smile as he turned and gave her an amusement and mirthful stare, with a great deal of love in them. "Must you wake me like this all the time, Shiroi-chan?" he whispered. Shiroi gave him a small wink before she separated from his neck, having her fill of blood for now. "I like waking you like this, Naruto-kun," she answered. Naruto gave her an amused look before he spoke again. "Do you have to straddle me as well?" he asked with an amused smirk, though there was a flush to his cheeks. "After all, your mate is straddling you with her naked body. While you are also in the nude, you try not getting a boner. It's impossible." Shiroi gave a small giggle. "Oh, is Naruto-kun getting a bit of morning wood?" she teased. "Well, maybe we should rectify that," she seductively whispered. She pressed her lips to his. They kissed slowly for several moments, before the kiss began to get more heated and passionate. Just as they were going to go further, a knocking sounded on their door. They both abruptly stopped and stared at the door, Naruto with a confused face, and Shiroi with a blank face, though inside her mind it was different matter entirely, as she was coming up with multiple ways to maim and brutally kill the person behind the door in the most painful and violent death possible. "Gaki, get your ass out here, would ya?" the perverted sage known as Jiraiya exclaimed, his voice slightly muffled through the door. Naruto sighed before he wrapped a few bed sheets around his waist and made his way towards the door. "Yes, Ero-sensei?" Naruto asked, once he opened the door, only allowing Jiraiya to see him, and not Shiroi. "Yeah, Gaki, get your stuff together, and get ready, we're going to leave soon." And he trailed off, however, when he noticed Naruto's state, or rather the kiss marks on his lips, combined with the slightly annoyed look the blonde was giving him. Jiraiya immediately put 2 and 2 together. "Were you and Shiroi getting ready to get active?" he leered, with a perverted expression on his face. Naruto immediately shut the door, very nearly hitting the perverted hermit in the face. Naruto waited for the shout of pain Jiraiya was bound to give, but slightly scowled when instead perverted giggling reached his ears, and it decreased in volume, though he could still hear it. He sighed before he gave Shiroi an apologetic look. "Sorry, Shiroi-chan, but it's time to leave now, so we gotta get dressed," he said. Shiroi pouted for a little, before she sighed. "Fine, let's just get dressed already," she grumbled. As they were getting dressed, Naruto thought about the last year of training he had. The last year of his training was somewhat interesting for the blonde. After 3 months of learning strategy, Jiraiya found him to be at an acceptable level, just a bit under Kakashi, though the blonde didn't like planning before a battle. After all, if you plan before a battle, then obviously you're going to stick to it. But what if something unexpected happened, and your plan wouldn't allow adoption? That was why he liked to plan during a battle, and come up with strategies on the fly. It was how he fought, and he wasn't changing his style. After that, to his and everyone's surprise, they found out he had a third element. To his great surprise, he had a small lightning affinity. That surprised the blonde, but he brushed off and learned how to channel his new chakra nature. After 6 months, the blonde believed he was at an acceptable level with his new nature, with Jiraiya agreeing with him. His relationship with the Kyuubi took an interesting turn, as well. Kyuubi stated that he would allow the blonde to wield 2 tails of his chakra because he proved himself to be a competent warrior. Kyuubi could be a sarcastic ass at times, but the blonde considered him a friend. Not to mention the Kyuubi had been with him since birth, so in a way, Kyuubi had always been there for the blonde, despite him not knowing. Though Kyuubi appeared to have blushed, not that he couldn't tell, and claimed that it was natural for the king of all Bijou to look after his subjects even if one was human. Plus the blonde represented him, so if he died, then he would be considered a failure of a Bijou for not only having a weak container, but for also allowing his container to have a disgraceful death. Naruto snorted at that. To him, the Kyuubi was a bit of a tsundere. And he was right. There were times when he would be cold to the blonde, at times when he would act like a worried mother when looking after her child. Of course the giant fox denied any of that. Finishing putting on his clothes and his robes, he looked himself in the mirror, making sure everything was in place. Throwing knives check, hidden blades check, rogue darts check, crossbow check, pouches check, kunai check, and finally Altair. Where the freak was Altair? The blonde looked around frantically, looking around for his faithful sword. A pulse reached the blonde, and he looked over to the door's entrance to see Altair leaning against the wall. Naruto in relief, the blonde moved towards the blade, and delicately picked it up. Thought I lost you for a moment there, Altair, Naruto said in a relieved tone. Altair pulsed in contentment at being in his wielder's hand once again. The blonde quickly placed Altair in its sheath, before he let it hang by his waist. The blonde checked himself over one more time. Seeing everyone in order, he moved towards the door, and waited for Shiroi to finish getting dressed. He didn't have to wait long, as his fully dressed mate came from the bathroom door, and moved in front of him. Are you ready for Shiroi-chan? The blonde questioned. Shiroi gave him a short nod. Smiling, Naruto placed his hood on, before he opened the door, and the both of them exited the room, and made their way down the halls, and down the stairs. Reaching the downstairs, they quickly spotted the elder Toad Sage waiting patiently for them, by the exit door of the hotel with a smirk on his face. Smiling, or rather smirking, the three of them exited the hotel. It was time to return to Konoha. Izumo is one of the two eternal gate guards, sighed, as his best friend Kotetsu was once again snoozing. Seriously, the bastard was lazy, a freak. Izumo sighed once again. He missed the Uzumaki kid. He knew full well who the kid's parents were. After all, he met Yondaime and his wife on several occasions. He knew enough about them to know that the resemblance to the Yondaime was no coincidence, not to mention the kid had his mother's attitude, as well. He suspected that Kakashi knew full well who the blonde was, as well, seeing as the masked Jonin was quite persistent on having the blonde on his team after he passed the academy. Heck, the Ika fan had to argue with Enko, Konoha's own snake mistress, for the blonde. Enko's reasons for wanting the blonde was because they lived a similar life, and that only she would be able to truly understand him, and give him the attention he needed. Kakashi's reasons were because the blonde was his sensei's son, and that only he could show the blonde what the will of fire truly meant. He thought it was a load of bull, seeing as, from his observations, the blonde knew full well what the will of fire meant. Kotetsu and Enko knew that Kakashi was just being a little selfish, wanting to remain close to his sensei's son in the closest form possible. The closest he could get to the blonde was becoming his Jonin sensei without causing suspicion. Enko was a bit heartbroken when the Sandaime took Kakashi's side. He should know, he was a friend of Enko, so he knew how depressed and disappointed she was when she couldn't train the blonde and take him as her apprentice. He remembered how when most of the Jonins got together and spoke about their students, she would stare at Kakashi in envy when he spoke about Naruto, and how angry she was when he only taught his team the tree walking exercise during an A-rank mission. She exploded and yelled to Kakashi on why he would take Genin on a C-rank mission turned into an A-rank mission with no support. Kakashi argued that he let his team decide if they should continue or not, and of course Enko exclaimed that he could have called for backup. Enko angrily said that Kakashi wasn't fit to be a teacher because of his lazy habits and his insufferable tendencies to be late. The friendship between the two had been a little rocky since then. However, when Enko heard that Kakashi was nominating them for the Chunin exams, she again snapped, and was furious with the former ANBU. After the meeting was over, she stomped over to Kakashi and let her opinion known about his course of action. She claimed that yet again, that he was unfit to be a Jonin sensei. Sending fresh Genin to the Chunin exams was like you wanted to kill your team, and that he probably didn't even train his team for the exams, let alone taught them anything other than teamwork, which is useless anyway if they didn't cooperate with each other properly. It was no secret that the Uchiha believed he didn't even need a team. Kakashi argued that Naruto was in his team now, and his student, and that if she didn't like it then she could take it with the Hokage. Enko merely gave Kakashi an angry and cold glare, and told him that she was going to be an exam proctor on Lido. Keep an eye on her surrogate little brother. Many of the people who heard her blinked at the relationship between the two, and before anyone could ask her why she considered the blonde her little brother, she stormed out of the building with a glare to any and everyone who looked at it. And yet again she was furious when she found out Kakashi was training Sasuke instead of the blonde. So she set out to find the blonde, and to her surprise she found him learning under Jiraiya. A smile lit her face knowing that he was in arguably, good hands. After witnessing that, she set out to give Kakashi a piece of her mind once again. No one knew what happened between them, but they all noticed how Kakashi shuddered when someone mentioned a rubber duck, and it was somewhat amusing for Izumo, watching Kakashi shudder every time someone mentioned a rubber duck, and he lightly shook his head, clearing his mind of all thoughts, and looked towards the horizon. His eyes narrowed however when he caught sight of 3 figures heading right towards the gate at a slow and leisurely pace. He kicked his best friend awake, not only making him fall out of his chair, but for him to also let out a surprised squeak. He silently laughed before he straightened up when Kotetsu was glaring at him. He silently gestured his hand to the 3 figures coming to the gates. Kotetsu's eyes widened slowly, before they gained a bored look to them, though his body did tense, as they were getting closer. When the 3 figures were close enough, both of their mouths dropped. Leading the 2 was Jiraiya of the. Behind him was a girl with silvery white hair, and pink slitted eyes, with a beauty so natural and beautiful that they needed several moments to regain their composure. However, the third and final figure surprised them immensely. Those robes, the gauntlets with the image of a large 9-tailed fox on them, the eagle-based sword strapped to his side, the crossbow on his back, it was the A-ranked unknown shinobi by the moniker Fox Assassin. However, they were paying more attention to his face that caught their attention, seeing as the hood was off his head. Spiky golden blonde hair tied in what they suspected to be a low ponytail, spiked bangs framing his face. Bright blue eyes that were gazing upon the village with a happy expression, and the whisker marks on his cheeks. It couldn't be, no, it was Uzumaki Naruto. Izumo heard his best friend softly utter, as a large smile came upon their faces. They idly noticed how the white-haired girl had her arm hooked around the blonde's arm like a married couple, but they cast that aside. After all, their favorite blonde was back. Gossip could wait. Yo, Kotetsu, Izumo. Still on guard duty, huh? Naruto greeted once he was close enough to the 2 eternal gate guards, a broad grin crossing his features. Kotetsu and Izumo chuckled along with the blonde and Sanin, though Shiroi merely gave them a judging stare for a few moments before she chuckled and giggled along with them. That didn't go unnoticed by Jiraiya, but he filed that away for later. Naruto, it's great that you're back, man. Konoha has been a little dead since you left, to be honest, Kotetsu said, after he gained control of his laughter. Izumo gave the blonde a pleasant and teasing grin. And who knew you would bring back a girlfriend, eh? He teased. Both of the Chunin were expecting the blonde to stammer and stutter in his sentence, but to their shock he smiled and placed his arm around Shiroi's waist. Kotetsu, Izumo, I want you to meet Shiroi-chan, my mate and future wife, Naruto said in a tone of warmth and love for the girl beside him. Shiroi blushed deeply beside her mate and husband-to-be, though it was unofficial. They had taken to calling each other since it was obvious it's what they wanted. Both Kotetsu and Izumo were stunned into silence for a few moments before they suddenly gave Shiroi a judging stare. After several moments, they both leaned back with satisfied expressions on their faces. We approve. They both started at the same time. Shiroi felt a surge of anger course through her. Who were they to judge their relationship? Who were they to decide if she was any good for Naruto? Who were they to say that Naruto and her needed their approval? Naruto seemed to agree with her, as he spoke in a slightly tense and disapproving tone. Since when did I need anyone's approval on who I chose to marry? Both Kotetsu and Izumo glanced at each other before they grinned at the blonde. Since that day when you were only 6, Naruto, the day you met us was the day we decided to be your surrogate older brothers, Kotetsu commented with warmth and a hint of fondness in his voice. Naruto stiffened before a large smile came upon his face as he stared at the 2 gate guards. Thanks for caring, guys. Meanwhile, Shiroi pursed her lips and thought when Naruto was 6 she searched the memories she obtained from the blonde when she drank his blood. When he was 6, her eyes widened slightly in realization. That was around the time of his 5th beating, where they nearly ripped his arm off, and one of them tried to gouge his eyes. But these 2 Chunin saved him, and they treated him to ramen whenever they could. She looked at the 2 with newfound respect. They definitely deserve to be called his older brothers. It's no problem with Otutu. Now get your ass back in the village already. Hokage-sama wants to see you, no doubt. Izumo grinned, giving the blonde a thumbs up. Kotetsu gave the blonde a brotherly smile, before he gestured to him to enter the village. Thanks, Aniki's, Naruto said, a smile adorning his face. Jiraiya gave the blonde a smile, happy that he now had brother figures to look up to. Shiroi stared at the smile on Naruto's face, and a smile of her own came upon her face just watching this heartwarming moment. Without any further delay, the trio entered the village, preparing themselves both mentally and physically. Hard to believe he's back, huh? Kotetsu commented. Yeah, and he's matured quite well as well, I guess. All that time with Jiraiya-sama worked wonders for the blonde. He even has a future wife, Izumo replied. Kotetsu grinned. Yeah, I'm glad he forgot about that Sakura chick, he said. Izumo looked at the direction the blonde and his fellow travelers went. I wonder just how powerful this is now, he idly questioned. Who knows, he's been with the Sannin for 3 full years. He must be way more powerful than Kakashi now, Kotetsu answered. You have a point there, Izumo commented. The duo would have continued their conversation, but they were interrupted by a familiar voice saying their names. Kotetsu-san, Izumo-san. The duo looked over, and they noticed a certain pink-haired girl with 12 years behind her. Ah, Sakura-san, and the Konohamaru Corps. Kotetsu observed with a disinterested look. Izumo snickered slightly at the glare of Sakura, and the 3 kids were giving Kotetsu. Hey, you 4 will never guess who just came back, Izumo said, with a gleam in his eyes at the curious looks he was receiving. So, has Konoha changed much since you were last here? Jiraiya idly commented, staring at his apprentice, ignoring the looks some of the villagers were giving them. Naruto gave a single glance around, before he shut his eyes. Nope, not at all, Ero-sensei. Same people, same attitude, different day. That was an understatement. A few villagers gave the blonde a friendly wave now, and then, while others merely gave him a neutral look before returning back to work. While most gave the blonde slight scowls, but didn't do more than that. Some of the women of the crowd gave him looks of a predator and lust, but they cowered in fear when Shiroi gave the females her evil eye. Most of the men gave Shiroi looks of lust, however a quick burst of killing intent from Naruto made them sweat and look away instantly, and they dared not to look back. Jiraiya's sweat dropped at both Naruto's answer and the actions they were doing. Teach those pathetic fleshing that they do not freak with your mate Kit. Kyubi suddenly roared, a little angry that those insignificant worms dared to look at his container's mate like that. He will not stand for it. Altair pulsed in bloodthirsty agreement. See, even the sword listens to me, the giant fox commented in victory. Guys, you know I won't kill them, Naruto thought. Kyubi snorted in disappointment. You could always maim them, Kyubi offered, going Tsundra for a moment. Altair pulsed. No, I will not maim Kyubi. And no, Altair, I will not hack off their limbs, the blonde thought, sending more killing intent to another male who looked at Shiroi in lust. Kyubi snorted in disappointment once again. Fine then, your choice. Just wake me up when something interesting happens, Kyubi said before he went back to sleep. Altair pulsed in disappointment at not being able to hack off the limbs of those villagers that looked upon his wielder's mate in lust. Naruto rested his hand upon Altair's pummel. Don't worry, Altair. I'll be sure to use you in tonight's sparring session with my clones, Naruto thought. Altair pulsed in contentment. Naruto smiled slightly, right before he was forced to send more killing intent to another villager who looked upon Shiroi in lust. Idly he glanced up for whatever reason, and found a good viewpoint. Hey, hold on a minute, I want to check out the entire village from that pole, Naruto said before he ran up the pole, and stopped at the top. Show off, Jiraiya muttered. Shiroi only slightly shook her head with a smile, before she looked up to see her husband to be overlooking the entire village from his viewpoint. They finally added Tsunade Bachan's face on the mountain, huh? The blonde rhetorically thought, as a fox-like grin came upon his features. It was true, they did add Tsunade's face on Hokage Mountain. The blonde smiled. It had been such a long time since he saw Tsunade, and his surrogate older sister Shizen. His robes ruffled in the wind, and his hair seemed to slightly flow, as well. He closed his eyes. He loved this feeling, the feeling of the wind brushing against his face, the feeling of freedom. Naruto and Ai-chan, a voice yelled excitedly. The blonde glanced down from his perch, to see 4 figures looking up at him. He grinned, before he spread out his arms, and leaped off his perch, and dived down like an eagle going for its prey. He adjusted his body so that he may be able to land on his feet when he landed, and he landed with a loud thud, right on his feet. Slowly he stood, and faced the stunned newcomers. Yo Konohamaru, Udan Moegi. He casually greeted the trio of newly graduated genin. He faced the last figure, and gave her a friendly smile. Yo Sakura. He nodded to her. The newly arrived others gave Naruto a once-over on his attire, and gave his sword a curious look before they filed that away for later. The air around them drastically decreased in temperature. Was winter coming this early? Seriously, for some reason it was cold, as the freaking Arctic. Except the only thing that was really freezing was your soul. Jiraiya shivered at the blank look Shiroi was giving Sakura. An emotion of sadistic glee passed through her eyes before they resumed being blank. But Jiraiya knew that look she had for a split moment. That was the look she had when she wanted to slowly torture someone, and then give them the slowest and painful death possible. He mentally offered a small prayer out of pity for the pink-haired girl. He almost felt bad for her. Sakura felt a cold sweat form on the back of her neck. She felt cold, and hollow, almost as if her very soul was being chilled. And just as quickly as it was there, it was gone. Now that the disturbing feeling was gone, she took the time to actually take in Naruto's appearance, and a slight pink hue entered her face. Who knew that the little shrimp she knew, as Naruto would become so much taller and more handsome. He was even more handsome than Sasuke now, and that was somewhat shocking to Sakura. She lightly shook her head. He was still probably the same idiotic blonde she knew. meaning he still had a crush on her. Confident in her assessment, she gave the blonde a smile. "So Naruto, do I look more womanly now since the last time you saw me?" Sakura asked, a smile on her face, as she stared at the blonde. Though a surge of confusion went through her when she noticed that Naruto's face did not leave its calm expression. Feeling a piercing stare boring into her head, she glanced to her right when she noticed movement. And to her surprise, a girl with silvery white hair moved to stand beside the blonde. Even though she was taller than white-haired girl, she couldn't help but feel as if she were in the presence of a vicious lion that was judging her. She felt as if her life was in this girl's hands. Looking into her pink-slitted eyes, Sakura couldn't help but feel like she had just done something stupid, and that she was treading on very dangerous grounds, and she didn't even know on what grounds she was treading on. "Nah, Sakura, you haven't changed at all since I last saw you," Naruto finally replied in a polite manner. Sakura's eye twitched slightly at his answer. Completely forgetting about the ominous feeling in the air, she stared at the blonde in annoyance, though she was also inwardly shocked at the polite manner in which he spoke. "Naruto and I-chan, who's the girl next to you?" Konohamaru asked, blushing, as he stared at the girl, along with Udan, who was also blushing just looking at her. While Moegi stared in awe at the girl's beauty, Naruto smiled at Shiroi-chan. "Would you like to introduce yourself, or should I?" the blonde asked. The Konohamaru core, and Sakura noticed the way he called her Chan. Shiroi smiled lovingly at the blonde, as she said, "No, I can do it, Naruto-kun," she answered before she turned her head to gaze upon the four individuals. "Hello, it's a pleasure to meet you. My name is Shiroi, though I'm not sure if that's the right thing I should say," she greeted with a gleam in her eyes, as she trailed off in her sentence. Everyone save Sakura did not notice the gleam in her eyes. Sakura's eyes narrowed only slightly. What did she mean by that? "What do you mean by that, Shiroi-san?" Moegi asked. Shiroi gave the three genin a kind smile. However, when she aimed her smile towards Sakura, it became cold and taunting. "Very well, I guess I should give a proper introduction now," Shiroi snickered. "As I said, my name is Shiroi. However, in the future I'm going to be called Uzumaki Shiroi, seeing as Naruto-kun is my fiancé." She finished her sentence with a light bow, and she treasured the look of shock on Sakura's and the genin's faces. Konohamaru's core eyes nearly bulged out of their sockets. This girl was Naruto's wife-to-be. That means that this was their older sister in a way. "Shiroi-ne-san," Konohamaru affectionately exclaimed, with the other two excitedly following soon after. Meanwhile, Sakura continued to stare at Shiroi and Naruto in disbelief. It just wasn't possible for Naruto with a fiancé already? How? What? Wah? Her mind, which had so many book smarts, could not comprehend what she had just heard. A lump formed in her throat as Shiroi turned her head towards her. Naruto was chatting animatedly with the genin to even notice their transaction, while Jiraiya was currently leering at a couple of women not too far away. Basically meaning it was just her and Shiroi. Shiroi's polite and now kind look was off her face, now replaced with a dark look of sadistic glee as she looked upon Sakura. Sakura could, for the life of her, not stop looking into Shiroi's eyes. Visions of her death were soon flashing through her mind, each one more gruesome and bloody than the last. She couldn't move, she couldn't breathe, she couldn't even think. Fear swept into Sakura's heart by just staring into Shiroi's this monster's eyes. She felt as if her very soul was being torn apart, and by the look of dark amusement in Shiroi's eyes, Sakura knew that if she had the choice and could get away with it, she would rearrange her soul into the order she most likely preferred best, leaving Sakura as an eternally broken beyond belief, or as a slave. Sakura released a breath she hadn't known she was holding when Shiroi removed her gaze. She prayed to whatever god out there that would listen to never leave her in a room alone with Shiroi. She didn't think she could handle it. Just being stared at by her was enough to nearly send her into a seizure. "Alright, that's enough everyone, you can play catch up later. Right now we have to get to Tsunade before she decides to cave in my skull for being late." Jiraiya jokes, having finished his leering at the group of females. Oh yeah, he had gotten some awesome research material. The Konohamaru Corps looked a bit disappointed before they brightened up when Naruto promised to talk with them later. Sakura offered to escort them to the Hokage's office, seeing as she needed to report to the Hokage's office anyway. They agreed, and set off, though Sakura made sure to stay at least 4 feet away from Naruto, seeing as Shiroi would glare at her whenever she got too close. It didn't take them long to reach the Hokage Tower. When they did, they quickly entered, and ignored the secretary who was telling them they needed an appointment. Seriously, they've had an appointment for 3 years, they didn't have to freaking wait. Tsunade was in a battle that took priority, for she was fighting an enemy so evil and vile that even Uchiha Madara whimpered when it was mentioned. What evil could be so vile and dastardly that even Uchiha Madara whimpered when it was mentioned, you may ask? That evil was the dreaded paperwork. Tsunade sighed in accomplishment, as she had gotten at least 500 documents signed. That means she only had 10 more documents to go. She was so happy that she could perform a tap dance. She glanced over at the last bit of paper she had to do, and her eyes widened to epic drastically, as it had gotten bigger by at least tenfold. She inwardly cried anime tears, as she now had even more work to do, and the snickering A and B were not helping. She looked over at the portraits of the other past Hokages, and she glared at the grinning portrait of Minato. "Damn you, Minato! How did you get your paperwork done so quickly?" she angrily exclaimed. The grin on the portrait of Minato seemed to get wider slightly, and it gave her a wink. "Now that's just creepy," Tsunade uttered before she turned cast off, as the stress finally got to her. Though if she turned back around she would have seen the portrait's grin widen more, and it seemed to cackle at Tsunade's plea, before it went right back into its normal pose. "Let's ignore that ever happened, alright?" Tsunade was distracted from her own hell of paper when knocking came upon her door. A chibi Tsundi was happily dancing in her mind, thanking Kami for the break she would have. "Come in," she yelled happily. In response, both the window behind her and the door opened. From the door entered Sakura with a silvery white-haired girl with pink slitted eyes. Tsunade raised an eyebrow when she noticed that Sakura seemed to give her cautious glances, while the girl merely had a polite and pleasant smile. And from the window entered Jiraiya, and her breath hitched in her throat as she caught sight of golden blonde hair. It couldn't be, could it? However, she caught sight of the whisker marks, and she knew this was Naruto. A smile lit her face, and without any further restraint, she shot up from her seat and moved towards the blonde. "Yo, Oba-chan," Naruto greeted, a grin forming on his lips. Tsunade, once she was close enough, flickered his forehead, causing him to stumble slightly. Hey, Tsunade was still as strong as hell, so it's understandable that a chakra-enhanced flick would make him stumble and feel a slight pain. "Don't call me old, you little," Tsunade exclaimed, as she shook her fist at the blonde. "Ho? Is Oba-chan afraid of being called out on her true age?" Naruto teased, a smirk on his features. Tsunade's eye twitched, and she was about to give her fellow blonde another flick to his forehead, when a slight giggle caught her attention. Curious, she turned her gaze to the silvery white-haired girl that came in with Sakura, and she noticed how she was staring at the blonde with affection, and a warmness that reminded her of how she looked at Dan. Her eyes slightly widened, before they returned to normal. "So you must be Shiroi, correct?" Tsunade asked, a curious expression on her face, as she stared at the girl. Shiroi smiled politely at the older woman, before she nodded. Meanwhile, Sakura was inwardly smirking a bit on the inside. If her sensei learned of the engagement between Naruto and Shiroi, then she would immediately pound Naruto, before setting him straight, and then telling the white-haired girl to get lost. "Oh yes," Sakura couldn't wait. "FO. It's nice to meet you, Shiroi. So you're marrying the huh? Alright, so far I like you already. You have that look in your eyes that kinda reminds me of another woman I knew at some point," Tsunade said, a grin forming on her face. Some of the A and B's jaws dropped when they heard Naruto was marrying the white-haired girl. Sakura's jaw dropped. What? Why wasn't her teacher pounding Naruto into the ground? Why wasn't she reprimanding him for getting engaged to a girl like this? Couldn't she see how much of a monster she was? "It's a pleasure to meet you, Tsunade-sama," Shiroi politely said. "Ho, ho, and she's polite too. You could learn something from her." Tsunade grinned, giving Naruto a pointed stare. Her fellow blonde merely snickered at her. Shiroi silently giggled at Tsunade's now annoyed expression at hearing the blonde snicker. Oh, how Naruto could giggle no matter what situation he's in. Meanwhile, Sakura's brain is still trying to reboot. After seeing Tsunade's reaction to Shiroi, folks, I think we just broke Sakura. And I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. So tell me, what do you want exactly? Tsunade asked, getting right down to business. Naruto gave her an innocent look. "Why, Oba-chan, I have no idea what you wouldn't come to my office when you get back from your training trip without at least going for some ramen? Or you would at least wait a day. So what do you want?" Tsunade interrupted, giving the blonde a smug look on calling him out. Naruto frowned for a moment before he chuckled. "You know me so well, Ba-chan," he grinned. He gestured to Shiroi to come stand beside. Shiroi, seeing no reason to not listen to her favorite blonde, moved to stand beside him. Once she did, the blonde gently took her hand into his. She smiled and gripped his hand. "As you can see, Oba-chan, there's gonna be two of us living in the same place, and I don't think my small apartment is big enough for the two of us," the blonde explained. "So you want to buy a new house or apartment?" Tsunade quickly deduced, though inside her mind a chibi version of her was happily dancing while piles of money were laying around her. Naruto nodded at Tsunade's assessment. "Yeah, so could you allow me and Shiroi to browse through a couple houses you may have?" he asked. Tsunade silently took out a folder labeled Homes for Sale, and offered it to the younger blonde. Naruto took the folder, and shortly after she and Shiroi were browsing through the house that caught their attention, with some comments like, "Oh, this house seems nice," or "Wow, this one is actually impressive," and they actually call this a house that isn't even a homeless shelter. Tsunade's eyes twitched, as the comments went on and on and on. Seriously, every time Shiroi opened her mouth it was to insult a house, or say it was impressive before she would turn the page and look at more. Seriously, a lot of those houses were expensive, and she just brushed them off. What were the girl's standards? Though Naruto seemed to notice Tsunade's annoyed state, he gave her an amused look. Tsunade raised an eyebrow before she noticed that Shiroi was giving her the same amused look. She was insulting the houses on purpose. That little. Tsunade took a deep breath to calm herself, and she glared at Jiraiya and the hidden Anbu when she heard them snickering. Several minutes later, Shiroi and the blonde were finally done browsing the houses they had. You have a lot of good houses, Oba-chan, but Shiroi and I have found a house that we would like to purchase, Naruto said, handing Tsunade the picture of a white 3-story house with the most beautiful gardens and a balcony on the top floor. The house had 2 bathrooms, 3 rooms on each floor, a kitchen, a large living room, an attic, and a large basement. Tsunade raised an eyebrow at the blonde. This was one of the most expensive houses they had, and a house that almost all of the villagers have tried to buy. But the house couldn't be purchased because it was way too expensive even by shinobi standards, and because that was the house Minato was secretly building should he ever have a large family. Not that anyone knew that. After all, the only people who knew about the house being built by the Yondaime were her, Jiraiya, Kakashi, and Hiruzen the Sandaime Hokage. Are you sure you want this house? Tsunade asked, even though she was planning on giving the blonde the house for free anyway. Of course we would like to purchase, Tsunade-sama, Shiroi politely said. Tsunade gave a slight grin. Well, you two are in luck. You see, the house was created by Yondaime, and it was meant to be given to Naruto. She said the message was very clear, it was created by your father. So it's your right. Naruto hummed for a few minutes before he looked at Shiroi's expectant look. The message she was giving him was clear: take the house. It would be a perfect opportunity to be close with your parents. The blonde smiled before he gave Tsunade a short nod. Tsunade smiled, as she had seen the interaction with the two. To think that they would be able to interact like that without actually speaking was incredible. Alright, Gaki, Tsunade began, as she reached into her desk drawer and pulled out a small key. Take good care of the house, also be prepared for extra attention from the villagers, she warned. Naruto raised an eyebrow. Why Ba-chan? He asked with a confused expression. Tsunade handed him the key, and she spoke shortly after he took it. Because almost the whole village has had their eyes on the house, but they could never afford it, so you might be getting some envious looks from them. Shiroi gave a small smirk. I'm pretty sure we can handle Tsunade-sama, she politely and confidently said. Tsunade gave a small smirk to the white-haired girl. I'm sure you can. Now get your boyfriend and get out of here. I need to talk with Jiraiya, she said. The duo of both Shiroi and Naruto shrugged before they walked past the still shocked frozen Sakura and left the door. But before they could, Naruto threw in one last sentence that made Tsunade want to bang her head on the desk. Yo Ba-chan, as thanks for the house, the secret to defeating paperwork is shadow clones. He gave Tsunade a grin before he closed the door. Tsunade felt the world around her stop, and she wanted to bang her head on the ground and say how stupid she was. But she couldn't, not when witnesses were here. She could do that later. Sakura, Tsunade yelled towards her still shocked student. Huh! Sakura blinked in a daze. She was having a weird dream that Naruto was actually getting married. Sakura, get out of here, will ya? I need to speak with Jiraiya about something. And you're in the way, Tsunade said to her now attentive student. Alright, I understand, Tsunade-sama. Sakura bowed before she left, wondering if the dream she had was real. Poor Sakura, she can't even accept the fact that Naruto is now engaged. Sure that her student was now gone, the busty blonde turned towards Jiraiya. Now think you can explain to me just how strong Naruto is now, and Kakashi got in here, she yelled shortly after her sentence. She didn't have to wait long, as the window to her office opened and she entered the masked Jonin. Yo, he lazily greeted, as he moved to stand in front of the Hokage's desk, though Tsunade could detect a hint of shock within his eyes. Looks like he arrived when she said Naruto was engaged. Before I begin, I have to ask him, could you get rid of your Anbu? Jiraiya seriously asked. Tsunade only made a single hand sign, and the Anbu suddenly phased into existence before they all blurred out of the room. Is that all of them? The perverted sage asked. Tsunade knew why he asked, as there was another presence in the room besides Kakashi, her, and the pervert. Silently the busted blonde nodded. Jiraiya narrowed his before he blurred. A loud snapping sound was heard, and both Tsunade and Kakashi turned to see Jiraiya holding the neck of a dead Anbu with the root insignia on its mask. The body glowed for a minute before it burst into flames, turning the entire body to ash. Looks like Danzo is getting bolder, Jiraiya grunted. It seems so, Kakashi uttered, staring at the dead root Anbu. Tsunade scoffed. Sometimes I just want to kill that warhawk, even if I have no evidence to support it, she darkly said. Jiraiya grunted in agreement before he moved back to stand before Tsunade. Now about our favorite blonde, he said, his attitude taking on a fatherly look to his eyes. I myself am also curious about Jiraiya-sama. Kakashi said, looking at the Toad Sage in curiosity. Just get on with it, Tsunade impatiently yelled. Jiraiya smirked for a moment. Naruto has long since surpassed me, he said, pride brimming in his voice. Tsunade. And Kakashi looked at him in disbelief before Kakashi spoke. Are you kidding, right, Jiraiya-sama? He asked. I'm not kidding, Kakashi. That has surpassed me. In tactics and strategy he's above your level, Kakashi, by a large margin if I do say so myself. In ninjutsu he's at least a mid-level Kage. In genjutsu he's a high-level genin, but that's understandable given his chakra reserves. His taijutsu is low-level Kage, and his kenjutsu is high-level Kage. He's mastered senjutsu, and he has control of 2 tails of the Kyuubi's chakra, the perverted sage explained. All in all, he is almost at either Uchiha Madara's level or the Shodaime Hokage's level, he finished. To say both Kakashi and Tsunade were shocked would be an understatement. The little blonde boy, who claimed he would be Hokage no matter what, was almost as strong as 2 of the greatest shinobi in history. To think he would come so far made Tsunade and Kakashi smile. So you're saying that instead of genin he should be a jonin? Tsunade asked, the smile not leaving her face. Jiraiya gave a short nod. Tsunade closed her eyes for several moments before she opened them. Kakashi, once Naruto has finished settling in, I want you to test him in combat in order to receive jonin rank. I want to see his prowess myself, Tsunade declared. I understand, Tsunade-sama, Kakashi curtly replied, a feeling of anticipation welling up inside him. Tsunade gave a satisfied nod before she returned her attention back to Jiraiya. Now what can you tell me about Jiraiya? She curiously asked. Kakashi curiously looked at Jiraiya, wondering about the girl who was apparently going to marry his former student. I can tell you this, Tsunade-hime. Kakashi trying to separate her from Naruto is a death wish, the white-haired ominously stated. She may seem like a well-mannered, kind, and polite girl, but once you've made her angry she does a complete personal change. She becomes dark, sadistic, cruel, and most importantly merciless. Jiraiya shuddered. Kakashi and Tsunade both glanced at each other before they looked at the Toad Sage in worry. She can get angry, but when you've truly pissed her off, there was only 2 times in which that happened. The first was when she learned of Naruto's life in the village. Both Kakashi and Tsunade stiffened. When she learned of this, I was certain you could feel her rage from at least 4 miles away. Naruto was able to calm her down, but I could still feel the suppressed rage that was within her. The second time was when Naruto overworked himself in his training. So me and her went to get some supplies. Both Kakashi and Tsunade noticed how Jiraiya shuddered again. A civilian began hitting on her, trying to get her on a date, of course. She politely denied, saying she already had a boyfriend. But people are stubborn, and he made the mistake of insulting Naruto. I can still remember the blank look she had on her face. Then she asked me to go on ahead. I did, but I jumped on a roof to see how the interaction would go. Here he took a deep breath. I didn't even see it, but 1 second the guy was standing. The next he was on the ground screaming in pain, as Jiraiya literally ripped off his arm from his socket. Before I could stop her, she ripped off his other arm, then she crushed them until nothing remained but ashes. When I stopped her, I saw the look in her eyes. Jiraiya's eyes glazed over, and once again he shuddered. The look in her eyes was of a feral rage so hot that it could have made even the Kyuubi whimper in pure fear. Not only that, but there was also a gleam of dark sadistic amusement in there, but rage was the most definite, and the cruel smile on her face spoke volumes. He finished. Slowly Jiraiya leaned forward. This is a warning that should be taken seriously, Tsunade. Do not make Jiraiya truly angry, and pray that the villagers don't do anything stupid. Make no mistake, she is a threat, but only if provoked. He seriously warned. We understand, Jiraiya, Tsunade said, while Kakashi merely pulled out his Aika, though Tsunade could see he wasn't paying attention to the book at all. Jiraiya nodded in a satisfied manner. Well, it's time for me to perform some research. He grinned in a perverse manner, before he jumped out the window before Tsunade could yell at him. I should get going, as well, Tsunade-sama. Kakashi lazily said. I do have to prepare for my fight with Naruto. Do I not? He stated, before he turned, and silently left the room. Tsunade sighed, before she reached into her cabinet, and pulled out an entire bottle of sake. She poured herself a cup, before she sipped the sake, and released the contents. Sigh. She looked out the window, to look over the entire village, and she let out a weary sigh. She hoped, prayed no, she begged Kami to not let the villagers do anything stupid because she feared that the village was already on thin ice, as it was. Thanks for watching my video, and make sure to check out the author of this fanfic. Link is in the description. See you next time. Till then, sayonara.